marked by the Alpha's betrayal. Omegaverse Werewolf Shifter Romance Audiobook. Written by Reinhardt. Chapter 1 The Night Courier. Sarenwald always breathed like a dying animal at night, wheezing through narrow alleys, twitching under broken moonlight, shivering beneath its own filth. Tonight, it reeked of copper and crushed myrrh, and Soren Veynar didn't know if the blood scent was real or imagined. He moved like a shadow pressed against another shadow. His hood was soaked from the mist, though the cloak itself repelled water, woven from ether thread stolen from the mirror seam. His boots didn't echo. His presence didn't ripple. A true courier of the mirrorways. The relic pulsed against his ribs, hidden beneath bandages that were more symbolic than protective. The moonshadow keystone hummed a melody only he could hear, a lullaby for lost souls. Even wrapped, even bound, it wanted to be known. Soren exhaled, slow. The mirror embedded in the archway to the black market glinted, warping his reflection as he passed. For the briefest moment, his face flickered, brown eyes gone lavender gray, hair darkening then fading into that misty lilac brown again. The curse of the mirror-born, a face never fully one's own. The underground corridor bloomed open into the belly of Sarenwald's forbidden trade district, Echelon's throat, as the couriers called it. Lanterns bobbed, but they didn't give off heat. The vendors wore faces like wax, some borrowed, some stolen. Soren didn't pause. The drop point was waiting. He ducked through an opal curtain and down a flight of stone stairs into a crypt-turned vault. No guards, just a seated nobleman in a green and silver robe, adjusting his gloves as if this was a parlor game and not treason. His face shimmered with the polished arrogance of the upper caste. "You're late. You're lucky I'm here at all," Soren murmured, drawing the relic from beneath his layers. The noble's gaze went sharp at the sight of it. "Is that the real?" Soren didn't answer. He never did. He dropped the object onto the velvet-lined case, turned, and walked back into the tunnel. The relic would do what it always did, bind or break. Either way, he would not stay to watch it choose. But something was wrong. Too quiet. The lanterns had stopped flickering. The mist had thickened, clinging not just to the ground, but to sound, to thought. Soren froze. Then the silver flash came. Blades, uniforms, feathers, the Silverwing division, and leading them, a tall figure in armor that shimmered with cold light, silver blue trim catching every angle of the moonlight that wasn't supposed to reach this deep. His face, sharp as a blade unsheathed, eyes like a frozen current, hair dark, with a teal-black sheen that shimmered faintly beneath the tactical circlet on his brow. Arden Solmere, Royal Inquisitor, Truth Weaver, and tonight the executioner of liars. Soren didn't breathe. "Seal the exits," Arden ordered calmly, without raising his voice. "The ghosts in here, they're not after the relic. They're after me." Soren didn't think. He moved, through the stonework, down forgotten stairs, into the moonlight walk, a collapsed aqueduct once used for ritual processions, now a graveyard of shattered tiles and echoing regrets. He leapt over a broken altar, ducked a net, rolled through rusted metal. A feather blade hissed past his cheek, slicing a few strands of hair clean. "Don't kill him," Arden said behind him, quieter now, closer. "Not yet." Soren darted through a gap in the arch and activated his mirror link. A pulse of magic shifted his features again, rippling the bones of his face, fogging his identity. He dropped a dream shell shard behind him. It burst with silent mist, hallucinatory, disorienting. But Arden wasn't a grunt. "Hallucinogenic traps," Arden muttered from behind. "Classic mirror-born trick." Another blast of air warned Soren. He barely twisted in time to avoid being pinned. But Arden caught the edge of his cloak, jerked it back with frightening strength. They collided. Soren's shoulder slammed into Arden's chest plate, But Arden didn't flinch. His grip tightened. Their eyes met, for the first time. Not on a wanted poster. Not in the dreamlight of rumors. But flesh to flesh. Soul to soul. Something, wrong and familiar, bloomed in Soren's chest, like being recognized in a nightmare. Arden's pupils dilated just a fraction. Then Soren activated the last shard. Dream injection. A flicker of silver light. A pulse. Arden stumbled. Just slightly. Enough. Soren slipped through his grip and disappeared back into the collapsing hallway, deeper into the ruin. But the pulse had gone both ways. Arden's mind burned for a moment. He saw images not his own. A child's hand clutching a rock. A lullaby hummed under breath. The word home whispered with tears. He swore under his breath, shook his head to clear it. Vesper, he said to no one. And the mirror beside him shimmered. Lady Vesper Wynn, her hair coiled like bone. Her eyes silvered glass, smiled back at him from the polished surface. You felt it too, she said. Didn't you? Arden's jaw tightened. No more games, Vesper whispered. The crown will choose tonight, and we both know who it wants. Soren reached the end of the ruins, lungs burning. Blood slicked his thigh where one of the blades had caught him. He collapsed against a broken statue, panting. But the air shifted again. Behind him, shadows. No time. He tried to stand. Too slow. A blade kissed his neck. Arden. This time there was no escape. They stared at each other again, breathless. Who are you really? Arden asked. Soren smiled, cracked and tired. Don't you want to remember? And he pressed 2 fingers against Arden's temple. Memory seed. Dream fracture. Arden gasped, eyes wide, just as the world inverted. He fell into a dream not his own, and Soren collapsed, blood trailing behind him like spilled ink on a blank page. Far away, the mirror shrieked. Lady Vesper leaned in. The mirror has chosen, she whispered. Tonight the king will fall, and a monster will rise. Above Sarenwald, the moon shattered into black flame, and the moon-ring prison opened. Chapter 2, Moonless Prison. Soren woke to silence, but not the kind of silence that soothed. This was the silence of absence, of light, of breath, of self. He blinked into nothing, yet his eyelids offered no barrier. There was no dark to shield from. There was just non-being. He tried to sit, and that's when the pain arrived. 100 threads pulled at him, not from flesh, but from within the marrow of his spirit, as if the act of having a soul was being forcibly corrected. Something was gnawing at the architecture of who he was, replacing memory with static, will with weight. The lunar Bastille was living up to its name. No moon, no stars. Just the dead loop of a prison whose bars weren't iron but reality itself. He was lying on a stone disk, suspended in an invisible chasm. Beneath him he sensed depth, not space but depth of consequence. Above, nothing. Around, echoes that hadn't happened yet. He breathed through his teeth. Focus. He reached into his sleeve, fingers shaking. The shard of moonstone was still tied to the cord at his wrist, smooth and cold against his palm. Its presence steadied him like it always had. With his other hand, he pressed 2 fingers against his temple and whispered under his breath. Stone remembers. Name forgets. Let me be neither. The rhyme shimmered for a moment in the non-air of the Bastille, then collapsed under the pressure of the place. Dream defense was weaker here. The Bastille didn't just cage you, it erased you. Soren clenched the moonstone tighter. He didn't scream. He never screamed. But he didn't last long. Footsteps materialized. Heavy, slow. Too purposeful to be anything other than him. A voice followed, like marble dragged across a funeral bell. Mirror-born courier. Or should I say, unclaimed pretender. Bishop the Rick Solmere. Soren didn't bother opening his eyes. It would make no difference. He felt the presence, heavy as a decree. The Rick walked around him, not out of curiosity, but certitude. He knew what he'd find, knew the creature beneath him would eventually break. "You've been marked, boy," the bishop said, "by the wrong things. You walk between names, but you do not own even one. That is what makes you dangerous." Soren grinned, teeth bloodied. "Funny. I was about to say the same about you." The blow was immediate, a sear of light through his spine. His body arched, mouth open in a scream that never escaped. "Don't test me," the Rick said, and the echo clanged like a dropped sword. "This prison listens, and it likes to replay pain." Then another voice spoke, cooler, controlled, but undeniably there. "Enough, Arden." He stepped into the edge of the circle, barely visible in the null light, but Soren felt him. Tall, rigid, breathing too shallow for comfort. The Rick turned to him. "The Crown has authorized your function," he said. "Initiate ruthless. Extract the truth." Arden didn't move. "You swore, Arden," the Rick reminded him. "You swore upon your father's memory." Soren snorted. "Always with the dead fathers in this family." Arden's jaw tightened. Then he stepped fully into the circle and knelt beside Soren. Not touching him, but close enough for Soren to feel the static crawling through the space between them. "This will hurt," Arden said quietly. Soren laughed without humor. "So will living." The ritual began. Ruthless was not a spell. It was a collision, a forced exposure of memory and essence. One soul laid bare beneath another, truth braided into truth until only instinct remained. Soren's breath left him as the world around them turned inside out. Suddenly, he was not in the Bastille. He was back. A corridor lined with mirrored arches, moonlight leaking through slitted skylights, cold tile beneath bare feet. His body small, weak, hungry. "Don't speak your name," someone whispered. "Not here. Not where they can hear." A slap, a metallic scent, the sound of glass cracking beneath a scream. The Moonmark Orphans corridor. He hadn't dreamed of this place in years. But now Arden was inside it with him, watching. His presence in the dream world caused fractures. The walls shimmered, split, their soul fields twisted. Arden stumbled through a half-formed door. In his eyes it was a memory too, a different corridor, a different childhood, and in that memory, fire. Soren felt it like it was his own. A man coughing blood, a boy kneeling in ashes, whispering, "I didn't want to leave you." Arden had never cried in front of anyone, but in this place there was no choice. Soren, trembling, reached out, an instinct more than a decision, and touched Arden's wrist. The feedback was immediate. Two souls not opposite, not parallel, but tangled. Threads fused where they weren't meant to be. Old scars, mirrored gaps. Soren's breath caught. In Arden's soul, his name was there, spoken once, long ago, in a voice that had sounded like wonder. Soren, not shouted, not accused, just said. Arden had known him before, but didn't remember. Soren pulled back, choking. The connection shattered. Light screamed out of their shared mind space, forcing them apart. He collapsed to the stone, shaking. Arden stayed on one knee, panting, trying to make sense of what he'd seen. His armor shimmered, duller now, streaked with the weight of knowing too much. Bishop the Rick reappeared in the void. Arms crossed. "Well?" he asked. Arden didn't answer. "You will speak, Arden Solmere." But the Inquisitor shook his head, slowly. "There's more," he said. "Too much." The Rick stepped forward. "Then extract it all." Arden hesitated. Soren's lips moved, barely audible. "If you go deeper, you won't come back the same." Arden closed his eyes, then stepped forward again. But before he could reach Soren, the keystone flared. Soren's chest erupted with silver-white heat, the moonstone shard embedded beneath his ribs glowing through his skin like a brand. The Bastille shrieked. The prison structure cracked down the middle. A wind tore through the void. A feather fell from nowhere. A single silver-white plume that shimmered with eerie brilliance, not belonging to any bird, but to something older. It hovered, then dove, burning itself into the center of Arden's palm. Then Soren's. Both cried out. The moonless prison collapsed inward. The Rick screamed. Light blinded them all. And then, silence. The first stars appeared in the ceiling of the void. Not many, but enough. And from the crater of shattered stone and soul-burnt air, two bodies lay, connected by a silver thread neither could see, but both could feel. The mark had been made, and the war hadn't even started yet. Chapter 3, Bond of the Fallen Feather. The air above Sarenwald shimmered like a heat mirage, though the city had no warmth left. Where once domes of obsidian and moonstone had pierced the sky, now only fractured silhouettes loomed, temples collapsed inward, roads forked into spirals, and the central spire of the Mirror Palace hung suspended in skycrack like a fong over a bleeding throat. The lunar Bastille had shattered, but it had not fallen quietly. From the fissure Arden and Soren had torn open, a new storm had bled into the city. Not wind, not fire, but madness. Whispers, screams, silver turning to rot, reflections climbing out of their frames, children singing lullabies in languages no one spoke anymore. And in the eye of it all, Lady Vesper Wynn, hovering within a cathedral's broken rose window, her silver-drenched hair fanned out like a dead spider's limbs. Her voice split across a dozen tones. "The moon has broken," she crooned, "and so shall all who once believed in light." Below her, mirror soldiers fell upon one another. Citizens clawed at their own shadows. Blood ran in spirals up stone walls. Soren staggered through the chaos, one arm slung across his ribs, the other reaching toward a boy sobbing against a shattered well. When he turned the child over, the face staring back was his own, age 6, eyes wide, mouth stitched shut. He dropped him. Behind him, the mirror cracked again. "Don't look at them," Arden's voice snapped, sudden and sharp. Soren blinked and focused. Arden stood in the middle of the wreckage, blood slicking one arm. Silver plume burned into the center of his palm like a wound made of light. His blade, half feather, half steel, cut through the mist like it remembered purpose even when the world forgot. "You still alive?" Arden asked tightly. "Barely," Soren rasped. "You?" Arden gave a humorless smirk. "Define alive." Soren could have laughed if it didn't hurt to breathe. The Rick had tried to kill him the moment the Bastille collapsed, drawn his holy blade and named him traitor to the mirrored throne. Arden had blocked the strike, citing the Fallen Feather Protocol, a law so ancient and so narrow that invoking it had stunned even the bishop. "You're invoking blood prophecy over a thief?" The Rick had roared. "He's not a thief," Arden had said. "He's been chosen." It wasn't loyalty. Soren knew that. It was strategy, damage control, maybe curiosity. But Arden had shielded him with his own body. And now they were both marked. Their palms bore the same feather-shaped brand, the same pulse, the same ache when they stepped too far from one another. It was not a bond either of them understood, only that it was real and alive. They navigated through the corpse of the old lunar corridor system, avoiding direct roads, each one now overtaken by dream beasts and mutating ruins. Vesper's nightmare had soaked deep into the bones of the city, and everything was beginning to remember too much. When they reached the ruins of the Faced Vaults, a place once used to house broken masks, shattered truths, and forgotten names, Soren stopped dead in his tracks. His hand, still bandaged around the keystone, trembled. "This place," he whispered. The arches loomed in familiar curves. The tiles, cracked now, once shimmered like starlight. A low wind pressed along the floor, carrying the scent of chalk and lilies. It wasn't just any ruin. It was the Lingram Hall, the place he had been brought after the orphan corridor, where they trained him to lie, to smile, to become the blank slate they could sell to any noble desperate for an obedient seer. Soren's vision blurred, not with tears but memory. He moved without thinking, brushing past broken doors and staircases until, there, a hollow in the wall. Still burned into the stone was the tiny scratch mark, just 2 parallel lines he had carved as a child. The night he thought he would die. Starved, forgotten. His fingers too numb to pray, he'd whispered a name into the dark. Not his own, but the boy who had given him the stone. A stranger's face, never seen clearly. A shard of moonlight in his palm. And a voice. "Hold this. Don't let them take you away." "Arden," Soren whispered before he could stop himself. The soldier turned. "What?" Soren looked up, blanched. "Nothing. It's just déjà vu." But Arden didn't look away. His gaze sharpened, as if something deep in the back of his mind had heard that word in a different voice. A smaller one. He took a step forward, and the shadows exploded. Figures lunged from the walls, not bodies, but shells. Dream forms, ragged silhouettes with mirrored faces, all wearing Soren's face. All smiling. They didn't walk, they glided. Arden drew his blade. "Don't let them touch you." Too late. One was already at Soren's side. He activated his fallback defense, mirror phase, and his body twisted into a new form, scattering his essence across fractured light. The doppelgangers shrieked, confused, lunging at the flickers. But the strain nearly split him open. He had too little energy, too much blood loss, and the last ritual had already burned his dream core raw. Soren collapsed to his knees, nose bleeding, breath ragged. Arden was still fighting, every motion precise, elegant, brutal. But there were too many. Soren felt it, they were targeting Arden now. He crawled forward. "Arden," he gasped. Arden turned just as one of the mirrored doppelgangers sliced through his leg. Blood sprayed. "No!" Soren lunged, shifting his reflection back to full form. He pulled all the aggression toward himself, activated the symmetry bait, a suicidal skill designed to draw dream beasts to mirrored energy. They swarmed him. He screamed, limbs burning, chest splitting, and then he heard it. Soren. Not yelled, not ordered, called by name. His real name, not the code, not the title. His name. And just like that, everything stopped. The mirrored faces froze. The dream light hissed. Soren, somewhere between collapse and spirit death, blinked through the blood and pain. Arden stood, barely upright, face pale, lips parted. He had said it, and the name had held. It wasn't a command. It was a tether. Soren felt the dream hold break. The mirrored horrors shriveled into dust. The corridor emptied. Only the two of them remained. Soren dropped, body shaking. Arden rushed to him, caught him before he hit the stone. "You idiot!" Arden muttered, clutching him. "Why would you do that?" Soren blinked up at him, face ghostly pale. "Because I thought maybe it wouldn't matter if I died. If it meant you lived." Arden exhaled, ragged. His hand shook as he pressed it to Soren's back. "You don't get to decide that alone." A pause. Then softer. "You're not alone anymore." Soren closed his eyes. "I've always been alone." "You're not," Arden said again, this time firmer. Silence. Then a heat bloomed at their hands. They looked down. The silver feather brands on their palms were glowing. Burning hot. They reached toward each other instinctively, palms out. When the marks touched, a pulse erupted through the corridor. The air cracked, the shadows screamed, and the dream world shattered like glass. They landed hard, back in the real in the broken corridor. Bloodied, burned, alive. Soren rolled onto his side, breathing like he was pulling the world back into his lungs. Arden's voice, hoarse, broke the silence. She said Vesper. She said 2 mirrored souls can't survive. Soren coughed. Guess we didn't ask her permission. A flicker in the air above them. Vesper's face, stretched through a dream-split mirror, appeared, her smile more knife than curve. You fools, she whispered. You think love can save you? You are not love. You are a flaw. Curse. And the mirror eats its mistakes. Then she vanished, and the world held still. But not for long. Chapter 4: Run or be devoured. The sky above the ruins bled lavender. Not from dawn, but from the bruised aftershock of too many dream layers collapsing at once. The mirror sky rippled like skin too tightly stretched. All around them, Sarenwald's blackened edge smoked under moonless flame. They had made it out. Barely. Arden was limping. Soren was half carried, half dragged, his face pale, pupils flickering like dying stars. The glow from their palms, silver-feathered and freshly seared, had dimmed now to a soft throb. But the bond still pulsed, threading one to the other. Neither spoke for a while. The ruins gave way to jagged hills, and from there, to the fringe paths, roads not made for trade, but for escape. It was here, on the edge of the moonshade crossing, that the air began to shift. Soren stopped. Arden nearly crashed into him. What? He hissed. Soren tilted his head. Listen. The wind carried breathless motion. Bare soles against gravel, hurried steps. The faint hiss of weapons not yet drawn. They turned just in time to see a cluster of figures emerge from the rocks. Cloaked, armored in patchwork, wary but not hostile. Refugees, Arden muttered. Soren narrowed his eyes. No, not unarmed enough. The figures surrounded them in a crescent. One, older and broad-shouldered, stepped forward. His right eye gleamed silver, a tech-embedded ocular, common among fringe guilds. But his cloak bore a faded sigil, a spiral moon with a blade through its center. The wandering sigil. Soren exhaled. Relief barely. I'm one of you, he said, raising his hands slowly. Courier designation Mirror Path 361. I hold proof of passage under the old code. The man tilted his head. Courier? He echoed. Those still exist? Soren stepped forward, pulled back his collar. A shimmering ink mark coiled across his collarbone. 3 mirrors intersecting. The sigil of the Mirror Courier, the couriers of forbidden truths. The man clicked his tongue. Haven't seen that in years. He turned to the others. Stand down. They did warily. Soren swayed slightly. Arden stepped forward, stabilizing him with one hand. A younger voice, sarcastic, sharp, cut in. What about him? The group's attention shifted to Arden. Soren glanced back. Arden's armor had been charred, stripped of insignia, but the posture was wrong. Too trained, too balanced, not fringe. Arden didn't flinch. He's with me. The leader raised a brow. Name? Arden hesitated. He's mute, Soren interrupted smoothly, burned his voice out resisting a truth branding. A silence followed. Then the leader shrugged. Lucky bastard. They were taken to a crevice camp, a makeshift shelter nestled beneath fractured cliffs. The walls were etched with warding sigils, faint but intact. The scent of burned herbs and old blood clung to everything. There were 6 of them total. Mercenaries, former spirit binders. One even wore the remains of a priest's robe, now torn and converted into a bandolier. Soren settled near the fire. Arden remained standing, back straight, eyes scanning. "You're terrible at pretending to be harmless," Soren muttered under his breath. "I'm not pretending. You could at least try." But Arden was watching one man in particular. A younger fighter with a broken wrist wrapped in black cloth. He hadn't said much, but his eyes were wrong, too alert, too calculating. "Spy." Arden didn't say it aloud. "Not yet." Soren spoke quietly to the leader, arranging for temporary protection, in exchange for information about Vesper's dream plague. The man, named Corin, agreed. Barely. Then came the night. It was always at night that things broke. The first scream came at the edge of camp. Short, wet, then silence. Soren shot to his feet. Arden was already moving. The camp had fractured. Tents upturned. Fires extinguished. Wardings torn. In the center of the clearing, the boy with the broken wrist stood smiling, his eyes empty sockets leaking mirror light. "Nightmare Walker, down!" Arden shouted, tackling Soren just as the first wave hit. The dream blast tore through the camp, turning one of the ex-priests into dust. Another stumbled, vomiting up black feathers. Shadows poured from the cliffs, shrieking in distorted tones. "Get to the bridge!" Corin shouted, already running. Moonshade crossing shimmered ahead. A narrow silver bridge stretched over an abyss that was more absence than space. It had only one rule. No truth could cross without a toll. Soren grabbed the keystone around his neck and channeled, his breath coming ragged. The bridge responded, but something else followed. Arden, covering the retreat, had been caught in the tail of the blast. His body jerked, and Soren turned just in time to see Arden drop to one knee, clutching his head. "Arden!" Soren started toward him, but the shadows were closing. Corin grabbed Soren by the arm. "We have to move." "I can't. He'll die if you stay." Soren's fingers twitched. Then he tore free. He ran back. Arden was surrounded by dream echoes, twisted mirror versions of himself, each whispering different memories. One bled, one laughed, one begged. He was caught in a soul loop, his worst truths made flesh. Soren didn't hesitate. He stepped into the circle. The moment he did, the dream figures turned on him. Soren activated mirror phase, his skin turning to fractured glass. But he wasn't trying to hide. He threw himself at Arden, grabbed his shoulders, and shouted, "Arden Solmere!" Nothing. He slammed his palm against Arden's, feather mark to feather mark. The bond flared. A heartbeat. Then Arden's eyes snapped open, glowing silver blue. The dream forms shrieked, dissolved. Arden collapsed into Soren's arms. They stayed like that for a moment, just breathing. "You idiot," Soren whispered. "You're supposed to be the stable one." Arden chuckled hoarsely. "Define stable." They made it to the bridge last. Only 4 others had survived. Corin. 2 women. 1 child, unconscious. The crossing accepted them, but only because they all bore new scars. The toll had been taken. They didn't speak as they walked across. Halfway, Soren stumbled. Arden caught him. Soren leaned into him, whispering, voice brittle, "If I vanish tonight, will you remember my name?" Arden froze, turned. Their eyes met, and for a moment time bent around them. Then, darkness. A pulse. The dream world tried to close again. Soren fell. Arden reached for him, and woke alone, in a cave. Blood dried on his chest. Soren was beside him, breathing, but barely. But something had changed. Arden's memories of his childhood felt different, warped, shuffled. A new name lingered on the edge of his dreams. One he hadn't spoken since he was a child. Soren. Not just now. From before. The silver feather on his palm glowed faintly. And from outside, the night howled again. Chapter 5 The Price of Trust. The mirror field stretched before them like a forgotten hymn, glass planes fractured by time, curved dunes of silver ash, and ribbons of fog that whispered in languages older than bone. The mirror wastes were a no-man's land between cities, a place where only ghosts and couriers dared travel. Soren trudged ahead with careful, limping steps. His breathing had grown shallow, but he didn't complain. He never did. Even when his shoulder burned from the last dream surge, or when blood stuck to the inside of his collar from coughing spells he refused to acknowledge. Arden followed 2 paces behind. It wasn't distance. It was instinct. As much as he didn't trust Soren. Not fully, not yet. His body had begun sinking to the other's rhythm. They bled in the same beat now, slept under the same sky, survived by the same thread. And then there was the feather. That infernal silver brand still pulsed faintly in his palm. It had cooled since Moonshade Crossing, but sometimes when Soren got too far, it flared again. It didn't burn. It ached, like longing with nowhere to land. Soren stopped near a jagged ridge. "We're close," he said softly. "To what?" Arden asked. Soren didn't answer right away. Instead, he dropped to one knee beside a cluster of blackthorn bushes, pushed aside the roots, and revealed a smooth, polished slab of obsidian about the size of a small window. A mirror post. "Didn't think these still existed," Arden murmured. Soren brushed his fingers across the surface. "Most don't, but I used to leave things here." He sat cross-legged, placed his hand on the mirror, and whispered a line of words Arden couldn't fully hear. The obsidian rippled. Letters unfurled across its surface, written in the mirrored calligraphy of old couriers. Soren took a shard of chalk and began to write. Arden circled slowly, not wanting to intrude, but his gaze kept returning to the corners of the slab. Burn marks. Tiny etchings. Someone else had carved there long ago. He leaned closer. A poem. Underscore the world may forget, but the stone still sings. Underscore. Underscore to the one who weeps without being seen. Underscore. Underscore I remember you. Underscore. Arden blinked. He had written those words years ago, when he was barely more than a child, half lost in a dream-blind fugue, hoping someone, anyone, might find comfort in the rhythm he'd learned to soothe himself. "How did you?" he began. But Soren was still writing. His hand trembled slightly, but he finished the message and whispered another word. The mirror shimmered. The message vanished. A delivery was in motion. Soren stood, slower than usual. That should reach them, if the lines haven't been fully severed. Arden didn't speak. He was still staring at the poem, at the way the letters had been carved, not copied. "You read this?" he asked, voice low. Soren hesitated, then nodded. "Years ago," he said, "I was alone, hiding in a salt vault. I didn't sleep for days, couldn't remember my name. But someone had left this behind." He touched the carving. "I repeated it, over and over, until the nightmares stopped." Arden felt his throat tighten. "You don't recognize the words?" Soren asked. "I wrote them," Arden said. The air between them thickened. The silence was no longer tense. It was fragile, like if either of them breathed too hard, the truth would shatter. Soren stared at him, fully, for once, not with calculation or guarded silence, but like someone letting down a wall he didn't even realize he'd built. "I think I knew," he said quietly. "Not with my head, but with whatever's left." Arden took a slow step forward. Their hands didn't touch, but the silver in their palms flickered in sympathy. Before anything else could be said, the bushes rustled. Soren whirled. Too late. A shadow lunged, one of the wanderers from Moonshade, his face twisted by something not entirely human. "Traitor!" the man screamed, blade flashing with nightmare steel. Soren moved to shield Arden on instinct, but Arden was already pulling his dagger. The attacker struck and missed. The blade hit the mirror post, sparking a shriek of sound and light. From the mirror's surface, Vesper's reflection bloomed. She stepped out of the glass as if through water, draped in silver thread and malice, her eyes hollow, her smile too still. "My darlings," she whispered, "always finding each other, always ruining everything." Arden raised his blade. "Back off." Vesper laughed. "No, no. This is the part where you bleed." The dream pressure surged. The sky above warped. Thorn vines erupted from the soil, wrapping around the mirror post. Flames kissed the edge of the world. Soren pushed Arden back. "I'll handle her." "You can't." "I can try." Soren stepped forward, his breath already ragged, and forced his body into mirror phase. His skin rippled. His eyes went glassy. He became other. Vesper's smile twitched. "Still playing dress up, little ghost?" Soren didn't speak. His focus narrowed. A second face overlapped his own, a trick of the mirror arts, and he moved with an elegance not fully his. He slashed the air with a gesture of his hand. The silver ribbon cut through dream vines. Vesper retaliated with a blast of shadow, slicing through his glamour. Blood bloomed from his shoulder. Another step, another cut. Then the spell collapsed. He dropped to one knee, face pale, mouth open in a soundless scream. Vesper lifted her hand. "Goodbye, little courier." "Soren." The voice didn't come from her. Came from behind. Arden, face lit with pain and fury, stepped forward, hand outstretched. "Come back." Soren's body was already twitching, soul separating. Another second and he'd be lost. "Soren Veynar, you don't get to disappear." The dream shattered. Vesper stumbled. The backlash hit like a wave. Light slammed into her body, and she hissed, recoiling. The mirror cracked. "You've made your choice," she snarled, gaze burning into Arden. "So be it." She vanished into smoke. The silence left behind was not peace. It was the weight of everything that could have broken. Arden dropped to his knees beside Soren. The courier's eyes were still wide, hands trembling. "I was almost gone," Soren whispered. "But you're not. I'm not supposed to be remembered. That's what they always said. That I was just a tool. A face." Arden leaned closer. "I remember you," he said. "Even before I knew your name." Soren swallowed hard. For once, he didn't pull away. He leaned forward, forehead resting against Arden's shoulder. "I don't want to vanish." "You won't," Arden said softly. "As long as I breathe, you won't." The silence returned, but this time it held something warmer. Then the mirror post exploded into flame. Both men stumbled back as the stone erupted, not with heat, but with burning light, words, hundreds of them, all the messages stored inside, igniting into ash and vanishing into the wind. Soren stared in horror. That was the last contact. Then the sound reached them, a distant howl, low, long filled with ruin. Not a wolf, people. Arden's blood went cold. That came from the capital. Soren turned to him, face drained of color. "Something's wrong." The wind carried another echo. Screams, shattering glass, sirens. The mirror city was falling. Again. And this time they weren't far enough away. Chapter 6, A Shard of the Past. The ruins of Moonshard Haven were older than either of them expected. Half buried beneath layers of forgotten magic and sun-bleached stone, the place had once been a sanctuary for dreamwalkers, those cursed or gifted enough to step through the mirrored boundaries between soul and sky. Now it was just a hollow shell, a broken husk clinging to a cliffside above a canyon no one named anymore. Soren didn't remember falling asleep. He remembered pain, heat, the fever crawl beneath his skin, the scent of ash on Arden's coat, the sound of someone whispering his name, not aloud, but into the marrow of him, like a memory returning uninvited. And then black, now dreams. He was small again. The corridor smelled of mold and candle smoke, and his arms ached from carrying too much silence. A door creaked. The stone floor was cold under his knees. He had stopped pretending to cry, not because he didn't want to, but because the crying never helped. Then warmth. Arms lifting him. A voice, rough, older, but steady. "Get up, Sor. It's not safe here." Thane, his brother, didn't answer, just hoisted him higher, one arm around his back, the other gripping a bundle of stolen bread. They ran, through vents, through tunnels, out beyond the orphan dome where the sky didn't glow, but the silence did. When they stopped, Thane pressed something into his hand. A stone, uncut, dull, but still glowing faintly with memory light. "Here," his brother said. "You hold this when it hurts. You name it home, even if you don't believe it yet." Soren stared down at the stone. "I don't have a name." Thane grinned, bloody and tired. "Sure you do. You're mine." He woke with a gasp. His entire body was drenched, soaked in fever sweat and half-crusted blood. The linens stuck to him like a second skin. He blinked. Moonlight spilled in from the cracked dome of Moonshard Haven. Crystals embedded in the walls gave off a slow, dying shimmer. Outside, the desert wind keened like something grieving. Arden sat near the entrance, half dozing against a pillar, one hand on his dagger, the other resting on his thigh, fingers twitching with dreams he'd never admit to. Soren let his head fall back. He wanted to cry. Instead, he curled in on himself, pulling the blanket tighter. His hand brushed something near his ribs. Tiny bag. He opened it. The moonstone Thane had given him all those years ago. Rough-edged, faintly warm, still here. He pressed it to his chest. A whisper returned, "Mine." Across the room, Arden stirred. He rose slowly, stretching out stiffness. When he looked at Soren, his expression softened, just barely. "You're awake. Shouldn't you be sleeping?" Soren's voice came out hoarse. "Didn't want to." Soren tried to sit up, winced. Arden was at his side in a heartbeat, hand on his shoulder. "Easy." The touch lingered. Soren stiffened, but didn't pull away. Arden's gaze dropped. His fingers brushed Soren's right hand, and paused. Tiny scars, faint crescent lines across the knuckles and between the fingers, as if etched there by someone with too much time and too little hope. Moon marks, not ceremonial, intentional. "You did these," Arden said. Soren didn't answer. "You mark yourself when it gets bad?" A beat. Then, "Yes." Arden swallowed. "I've seen it before," he said quietly. "In the outer packs. Some of the pups would." He cut himself off. Soren's eyes flicked to him, curious. "What?" Arden hesitated, then spoke, voice rougher than before. "There was a boy, not much older than you were in that memory. A runt, quiet, soft eyes. I gave him up." Soren blinked. "What?" "I told the enforcers where he was hiding. Said he was leaking dreamlight. Said he was a threat. He wasn't. He was just scared." Silence. "I thought if I gave them someone weak, they wouldn't see the cracks in me." Soren stared at him. "You want me to say I understand?" "No." Arden looked away. "I don't think I deserve that." Soren's voice dropped to a whisper. "You don't." Arden nodded once. Took it. Didn't flinch. Soren closed his eyes. Then softly, "But you didn't lie." A beat passed. Then another. Soren slowly leaned back against the stone wall, every muscle stiff with caution. "I dreamed of Thane," he whispered. Arden said nothing. My brother. He's the one who got me out. Before the rituals. Before they cut our names away. Soren's fingers curled into the fabric of the blanket. He gave me the stone. Taught me how to remember something even when it hurt too much. Arden leaned against the opposite wall. Let the silence breathe. Do you think he's alive? He asked finally. I don't know. Soren's voice was barely audible. But I feel him sometimes. Like, if I stop walking, he'll stop breathing. So I don't. From the shadows outside the dome, a figure watched. Tall, hooded. A scar split his right brow, and in one hand, he turned a worn piece of stone over and over again. But he didn't step forward. Not yet. He vanished as the moonlight shifted. Inside, the dream changed. A pulse of air swept through the ruin. Soft at first, then stronger. Soren tensed. His fingers twitched. Arden's dagger was already in his hand. A whisper filled the space between them. Not a voice, but a scent. Lilac. Burnt blood. Soren froze. Arden stood. Vesper, Soren said, not even needing to see her. The shadows on the far wall writhed. A shape peeled free. Lady Vesper Wynn, dressed not in silver but in memory. Her face shifting through the version Soren least wanted to remember. His mother, his mentor, his brother, then Arden. Each time, the voice whispered something cruel, something almost true. He'll leave you. He's already left one boy behind. You think you're different? You're just his second sin. Stop, Soren rasped. You always beg. You beg, and still no one stays. I said, stop, but the words weren't enough. The shadow Arden stepped forward, mouth curled in disdain. You think he won't run the moment you stop being useful? Look at you. Look what you are. Arden grabbed Soren's arm. Look at me, he said, voice sharp and real. The dream broke. Soren gasped. Arden knelt in front of him, eyes clear, hand on his shoulder. I'm still here. Soren trembled. I don't know how to trust that. I don't know how to deserve it, Arden said. But I'm trying. Soren blinked quickly, then looked away. I need some air. Arden hesitated, then nodded. Don't go far. Soren walked into the dark, past the pillars, past the broken arch out into the desert night where wind carried no scent and stars blinked like unsure promises. He pulled the moonstone from the pouch, took his dagger, pressed the blade into his palm. Just a little, a new crescent. It bled. He closed his hand around the stone. I still remember, he whispered, even if no one else does. A rustle behind him. He turned. Something moved in the dark. Large, quiet, a shape. A man? No. A beast? A voice growled low, not quite human. Soar. The stone pulsed. He took one step back. The wind screamed. Then silence. Chapter 7, Night of the Blood Moon. The moon bled, not in streaks or slivers, but in a full-bodied pulse, crimson blooming across the sky like a heartbeat ripped into the open. Where once stars glimmered, now only the swollen sphere loomed above Moon's hard haven, casting the ruins in a rust-colored glow that made the stones sweat shadow. Soren stood alone at the cliff's edge, his breath short and visible despite the warmth. The wind no longer moved like air but like something with intent, whispering secrets against his skin. Behind him, Arden stepped through the fractured archway, blade sheathed but hand resting on the hilt out of habit more than fear. You feel that? Soren asked without turning. Yeah. Arden's voice was tight. The pull. It had started an hour ago. Subtle. A tingling behind the eyes, a drag in the lungs. Now it was unmistakable. Something in the marrow of their bones hummed in sync with the sky, as if the blood moon wasn't light, but command. From the hills beyond, wolves howled. And in the earth beneath them something ancient shifted. Then it began. The ground around the haven split, not in quakes, but in design. Lines etched themselves into the stone, forming a spiral of script no living hand had written. The glyphs glowed red, then white, then black. Moonlight folded inward. Arden reached for Soren, but it was too late. The world vanished. They fell, not through space but through memory. Soren hit ground that wasn't ground, a mirror plane of dusk-hued ash. He stood barefoot, clothes changed, skin smoother, eyes wide. He was a child again, and he was alone. Thane? He called, voice high, brittle. No answer. He turned, and there was the corridor. Endless, silent. He ran through it, heart pounding. Doors loomed on either side, each marked with his name, but not the name he chose. Names given to him, names used to sell him. Then he reached the end, and there stood Thane, face grim, eyes shadowed. Behind him Arden watched, arms crossed, distant. Don't come any closer, Thane said. Wait, please, you said. You were never meant to last, Soren stumbled. Thane. You weren't strong enough then. You're not strong enough now. He turned and walked away. Soren ran forward, but the ground melted. He fell, arms outstretched, fingers reaching for something, anything, and finding only void. Above, Arden's face hovered, expression cold, eyes unreadable. You break everything you touch, his voice echoed. Soren screamed. Elsewhere, Arden stood in a different dream. A fire blazed in the background. A wolf pack screamed as one of its youngest thrashed under a nightmare surge. His father stood in the center, wounded, but upright. And Arden, 12, small, bloodied, held a blade. Run, his father said. Take the path. But there's no time. In his memory, Arden ran. In the dream, he hesitated. Behind him, his friend, male, cried out, caught in the jaws of a dream beast. And again Arden ran. When he turned back, they were gone. Blood. Silence. You left them, a voice whispered. It was his own. You ran. You survived. And that's the only reason you got to wear the uniform. Then Soren appeared, older, cold. So why would I ever trust you? Arden flinched. I'm not, he tried. You're not a hero, the voice said. You're not even decent. I never said I was. Then what are you? Arden looked up. To him, he said softly. Just someone who keeps choosing to stay. The dreams collided. Soren screamed again, trapped in his falling. And Arden stepped forward. He walked through his own guilt, through fire, through memory. He found Soren in the mirror void, curled inward, breath caught in a stuttering gasp. Soren. No response. Soren Veynar. Nothing. Then, quietly, tenderly, I know what it means to run. I've done it all my life. But I'm not leaving you here. He knelt beside him, took Soren's hand. The moment their palms touched, silver feather to silver feather, the dream cracked. A scream tore through the plain. Vesper's laugh followed it, cold and knowing. Do you think this changes anything? She whispered from nowhere and everywhere. Your bond is a noose. One of you will hang from it. But her voice weakened as the feathers pulsed. Soren shivered, then stirred. Arden. His eyes fluttered open, and he cried. Just once. One sharp breath that wasn't pain, but recognition. You stayed, he whispered. I'm not going anywhere, Arden said. Then light, real light. The dream world shattered. They woke in the ruins of Moon's hard haven. Everything hurt. Blood leaked from Soren's nose. Arden's knuckles were split. Both of them shook like newborns. But they were awake, together, until the sound came. Boots, a lot of them, clanking armor, low voices, then his voice. Bishop the Rick Solmere. Bring me the heretics. Arden scrambled to his feet, staggering. Soren tried to rise. Failed. Arden caught him. Theric's voice rose again. You may have escaped the mirror's judgment, but the flame still burns. Above, the sky cracked. The mirror veil shimmered. Pieces flaked off. Moon's hard haven began to collapse. Vesper's voice returned one last time, now distant, but clear. Your pasts will bury you, and your names will not be enough to save you. Soren's reflection flickered. His skin cracked like porcelain. His spirit mask began to fracture. Arden, he gasped. It's happening. I know. They ran. But the moon was still bleeding, and the night was far from over. Chapter 8 Wolves at the Door. They ran through fog that no longer clung passively to the earth, but reached for them, fingers of mist curling up over the jagged edges of the mountain trail, dragging dream murmurs in its wake. Each breath burned. The moon had vanished entirely now, replaced by something wrong. A fractured halo that pulsed in the sky like a wound refusing to close. Beneath it, the world had turned mirror soft, edges blurred, trees swaying not with wind but with memory. Soren stumbled. His lungs screamed. His vision flickered between what was and what could be, between the moss-covered stones of Munshard's trail and the smooth obsidian corridors of the Bastille. Reality was folding, and behind them the wolves were coming, metal-clad, scentless, precise. Bishop the Rick Somere's elite. Arden had counted them during their retreat: 8 enforcers, 2 veilbinders, and 1 hunter-priest with a scent hound whose breath reeked of dreamflame. All bred to erase anomalies. All chasing them. I'll slow them, Arden said, pulling up near the ridge's edge, chest heaving. You keep running. Soren whirled. No. You're limping. You can't outpace them. I'm not leaving you. You don't have to leave. Just survive. Arden's voice trembled, not with fear, but with something far worse. Resolve. The silver feather on his palm was glowing again. Too bright. Too hot. Soren stepped toward him. Arden, your mark. I know. Arden winced. The feather brand pulsed like it was being peeled from his skin. The light threaded up his forearm, into his neck, then vanished behind his eyes. It's backlash, he gasped. Too much binding. Too fast. Soren reached for him, but Arden pulled away, even as his knees buckled. He fell against a tree. The bark blistered where his shoulder touched it. Soren's heart thundered. He'd seen this once, when a bonded soul tried to defy its mark. The body burned from the inside out, and Arden was still trying to protect him, still trying to hold the line. Behind them, footsteps rang like hammers against stone. The soldiers were close. Go! Arden choked out, blinking through tears. Please! No! Soren said again, firmer. I told you I don't run anymore. He turned, pulling his coat tighter, reached into his sleeve, pulled free the shard of moonstone still sewn into his inner cuff, held it to his lips. Cut! He whispered. His skin shimmered. The transformation wasn't graceful this time. It split through him like a storm. His face fractured. The shimmer moved down his chest, across his limbs, until the man standing there was half reflection, half boy, half wraith. Perfect lure. Stay here, Soren told Arden. You want me to survive? Then let me be the decoy. Soren. Don't. But he was already running. Down the slope, into the clearing where the soldiers had begun to fan out. Bishop the Rick stood in their center, robed and unbothered. His hands were clasped, his voice murmuring scripture under his breath as his eyes scanned the mist. Then they found Soren. Theric's lips curled. There you are. Soren didn't answer. He just kept moving. The soldiers gave chase. They didn't see the shimmer in his wake. Didn't notice that his footsteps left no prints. Didn't realize he was leading them straight to the edge of the ridge's broken path. Until it was too late. The first soldier stepped on cracked ground. He gave. He fell. Two more followed. Soren reached the edge and turned, breath ragged. The Rick stood 20 feet away. Alone now, eyes narrowing. You think illusions save you? No, Soren said. But I'm not the one who needs saving. The Rick raised his hand, light gathering in his palm. But Soren's vision spun. He staggered. His reflection cracked. The magic backlashed. He stumbled. Over the edge. Soren! Arden's voice broke across the clearing. Too late. Soren fell. The world narrowed to wind and stone and pain. Then, nothing. Arden ran. Down the path. Through the mist. Past blood and broken branches. Soren! The clearing was empty now. Only a smear of silver blood marked the place where Soren had fallen. Arden dropped to his knees at the cliff's edge, eyes burning. Below, nothing but rocks and silence. A choked breath escaped him. Then, a whisper. Arden. He turned. His own name came not from the wind, not from memory, from within. The feather on his palm flared again. His mark burned, then cooled. And in its glow he felt Soren, not gone, not yet, but fading. I'm coming, he whispered. He stood, wiping the tears that had spilled before he could stop them. Then, a rustle behind him, a figure emerged from the trees. Worn leathers, pale hair matted with blood, a scar over his right eye. Thane, alive. I thought I taught him not to do stupid things like that, he muttered, stepping past Arden. You're? Soren's brother, Thane said. Yes, no time. He pulled a small object from his belt, a charm etched with names long buried, and pressed it to the ground. The earth sang. The magic flared outward, forming a barrier across the mountain trail. Then it exploded in silver light, blinding and bright. A scream echoed from the woods, soldiers caught in the blast. Thane stumbled. Blood poured from his side. Arden caught him before he collapsed. That'll buy you time, Thane rasped. Find him. Keep him safe. Arden nodded. I will. Thane smiled faintly. He still cries in his sleep. He thinks no one hears. Then his eyes closed. He didn't die, but the silence around him stretched thin. Arden carried him to shelter, and then he climbed down the cliff. He found Soren half buried in the rocks, bloodied, unconscious, but breathing. Arden held him like he was made of something breakable. When Soren stirred, hours later, it was to the feeling of warm arms, a heartbeat too close, and a voice murmuring something against his temple. He blinked. You're here. Arden didn't answer at first. Then, I'm more afraid of losing you than dying. Soren's breath hitched, and for once he didn't pull away. He leaned into the warmth and stayed. Later, as they limped through the mist, shoulder to shoulder, both wounded and wordless, Soren broke the silence. When I was 7, he whispered, I almost let go of everything. Then a boy's poem saved me. I know, Arden said softly. I wrote it. Soren stopped, looked up. Their eyes met, and nothing needed to be said. Far behind, the trees burned, and something howled. Not wolves, not soldiers, something worse. Chapter 9, Alliance of the Broken. The village of Echo Hollow wasn't built so much as grown. Nestled in a crescent ravine and veiled by illusion-thick mist, it pulsed with spirit stone roots and sigils carved into bark. Homes were carved from trees that breathed. Pathways floated above moonlit springs. The very air shimmered with residual dreamlight, broken, wild, but still alive. Soren had seen places like this in his courier days. Sanctuary hamlets, underground settlements for the outcast and the oathless. But even he hadn't expected Echo Hollow to be so intact, or so wary. The moment they crossed the outer barrier, half a dozen armed dream binders encircled them, eyes glowing with psionic flame. Arden had instinctively moved to shield Soren, but Soren raised both hands, flashing the faded seal of the mirror courier across his forearm. The symbol glimmered in recognition. Ancient truths still held weight. They were allowed entry, but not trust. That would have to be earned. Now, 3 days later, Soren sat cross-legged on a flat stone beneath one of Echo Hollow's whisper willow trees, trading memories for ink and healing tinctures with the settlement's quartermaster. His voice was calm, measured, his eyes half lowered as he recited a ghost map of bloodlines lost during the last Moon War. For every answer, he earned a vial. For every truth, a coin carved from mirrored bark. Watching from a short distance, Arden leaned against a hollow stone post, arms crossed, jaw tight. He hated this. Not the bartering, not the diplomacy, but the way Soren transformed in front of others. How his voice softened, how his edges dulled, how he let strangers closer than he ever let Arden. Especially him, a boy, no more than 17. Wild hair the color of ash leaf, freckles like spilled stardust. A seer in training named Kalen, who sat at Soren's feet now with wide eyes and questions that never ended. Soren answered them all. Patient, gentle. Was it true? Kalen asked. You once walked through an unbroken mirror without losing your name? Soren smiled, barely. I still don't know if I lost it. Sometimes I think I just misplaced it for a while. Kalen laughed and leaned closer. Arden turned away. Later, at the communal fire, he barely touched the soup pressed into his hands. Soren sat a few stones away, Kalen still beside him, their shoulders nearly brushing. Arden watched the way Soren tilted his head when the boy spoke. How he offered small nods of encouragement. How he gave warmth like someone who never believed he deserved it, so he gave too much. And something in Arden coiled. Ugly. Old. He's not yours. He's not even mine. Someone tapped his shoulder. A woman with antlered braids and moon-dyed robes. One of the council speakers. Join us, she said. Tonight is the trial feast. You and your partner are honored guests. Arden blinked. Trial? She smiled, cryptic. A celebration of broken souls finding home. The feast was a slow, shimmering thing. Tables carved from glacier birch. Fruits that glowed. Songs sung in forgotten tongues. Wine poured from moon-petal cups. Soren sat among the council, offered a place of distinction. His hands, freshly bandaged, trembled slightly under the flicker of spirit fire. He'd worn black again tonight, an old habit, one he never explained. But Arden knew. Black didn't draw attention. It absorbed it. Arden sat beside him, wordless, watchful. Then the questioning began. A tradition, they said, for all outsiders. Each guest had to speak a truth. I'll go first, Kalen offered, voice too bright. I once saw a dying wolf sing its name into a tree. I carved the bark. I sleep beside it still. Laughter. Murmurs. Then, your turn, a counselor said, nodding toward Soren. He paused. Then, with slow breath, said, I used to mark my hands with crescent cuts when I thought I didn't exist. Not to die. Just to remember that I could still feel something real. Silence fell. Even the fire seemed to dim. Then someone whispered, Strong. Soren looked down. Arden couldn't look away. But then the attention turned. To your shadow, the counselor said, motioning to Arden. What truth does he carry? Soren looked up. Arden hesitated. Too long. And in the silence, doubt spread. Soren's shoulders drew tight. The old wariness returned to his face like a shutter slamming shut. Arden began, then stopped. He looked at Soren, saw the way the boy sat with his hands clenched under the table, the way his throat moved when he swallowed. And he broke. "I hate watching people touch you when I know I never learned how," he said. A beat, then another. Gasps, mutters. But Soren froze. His breath caught. "I hate it because it makes me feel like I missed my chance." Soren stood, abrupt, shaking, then turned and walked out of the firelight, fast, not looking back. Kalen moved to follow, but Arden rose before he could. "I'll go," he said, voice rough. "Stay here." Soren didn't go far. The lake, still as glass, waited beyond the trees. He sat on its edge, arms around his knees, the reflection of the moon cracking gently over the water's skin. He didn't hear Arden approach, only felt it, a quiet shift in the air, then a warmth at his back. Arden sat behind him, not too close, not too far. "I didn't mean to say it like that," Arden said softly. Soren didn't answer. "I meant, I'm scared. Of being too much. Of not being enough." Still silence. Arden exhaled. "You look at me like I'm safe. And I don't know if I've ever been that for anyone." At last Soren turned. His eyes were wet. He didn't bother to hide it. "I don't need you to be perfect," he said. "I need you to stay." Arden swallowed, then reached, pulled him gently into his arms. Soren didn't resist. They sat like that for a long time, breath to breath, warmth to warmth, until the stars changed. By morning, the village had turned. The shrine was broken, supplies missing, a warding mirror shattered in the council house. And the boy Kalen was gone, along with half the spirit tinctures and 2 maps. Voices rose, fingers pointed, and at the center of the storm, Soren. "You knew him," someone shouted. "You brought him here." "No," Soren started. "He was manipulated," Arden said, stepping between them. "If you want to blame someone, blame me." The counselor turned cold. "We do." And Soren's wrists were bound. Again. Chapter 10, The Silent Betrayal. The walls of Echo Hollow were meant to keep nightmares out. Instead, they held one in. Soren's cell wasn't called that, not allowed. The Dreambinders who escorted him there claimed it was a protective rest chamber, a quiet place for reflection. The warded door said otherwise. So did the bitter taste of herbs on his tongue, the sluggishness dragging at his limbs, the way his thoughts stuttered against the edges of his own mind. He had been drugged. Not enough to black him out entirely, just enough to make him forget how to fight back. He lay on the mat, chest rising in shallow rhythm, the silver thread of his featherbrand barely flickering. His hands twitched occasionally, as if grasping at things not quite real. Outside, the wind stirred through the hollow. Arden moved like a shadow through the mist-choked trees, his coat slicked with condensation and blood from a cut he'd acquired in a scuffle with a perimeter guard. His expression was carved from stone. Something was wrong. He'd known it from the moment Kalen disappeared. Known it deeper when the council turned on Soren too quickly, too easily. Now he followed threads that led him to the abandoned root hall beneath the dream archives. Place sealed off for decades. And yet it had been opened. Inside, glowing faintly under a dreaming mirror, stood Kalen. Before him shimmered a mirror-like pool of water, liquid glass. And in its center, Lady Vesper Wynn. Or rather, her reflection. "You're late," she said, voice rich with smoke and sweetness. "I expected him hours ago." Kalen bowed his head, trembling. "They locked him up. I didn't have time." "You had everything." Vesper's eyes burned from within the mirror. "You only had to give me what was mine." Arden didn't wait. He stepped into the hall and slammed the door behind him. Kalen whirled. Vesper smiled. "Ah," she said. "The loyal mutt. Did you come to confess your own sins?" Arden strode past Kalen, ignoring the boy's panicked retreat. Where is he? Vesper spread her arms. Safe, for now. Though I doubt he'll stay that way, not if the dreams burn much longer. Arden's hands curled into fists. I'll trade, he said. Vesper blinked. What? You want pain? Take mine. You want memory? Take mine. You don't get him. There was silence. Then laughter. Vesper stepped forward inside the mirror. How dramatic. As if a soul so brittle could interest me. But I'm curious, what would you give me, Arden Solmere, for your little stray? Arden bared his forearm. Take what you want. Vesper's smile twisted. The mirror exploded outward, not with shards, but with light, reaching for him like tendrils. They burned. They bit. Arden grunted, falling to his knees as the energy poured into him, peeling back his memories, clawing into places he hadn't dared look since he was a child. Do you remember the fire? She whispered. He did, too well, and now she did too. Felt like drowning. But somewhere beneath the agony, he whispered a name. Soren. The bond responded. In the locked chamber, Soren's body jerked. His eyes fluttered, and the dream returned. He was back in the corridor. The orphanage burned again. Smoke black and thick, walls crumbling around him. Screams echoed. Children scattered. A hand gripped his wrist. Arden's? Thane's? He didn't know. Then the hand vanished. He was alone. The flames rose higher. He called out, voice breaking. Please, please someone. The door slammed shut behind him. Trapped. He pounded his fists. Don't leave me. The fire reached his skin, kissed him cruel and gleaming. He dropped, curled in on himself, until another voice, soft, desperate, real. Soren, come back. He knew that voice, even in the dark, even through pain. It was the only thing that ever sounded like safety. Arden, he gasped, and the flames faltered. His eyes opened. The haze clung to his vision, but the mark on his palm was glowing, bright, furious. The door flung open. Arden burst in, face pale, blood running from his nose and temple, but eyes locked on him like he'd been drowning too. I'm here, Arden said. Soren blinked. Tears spilled down his cheeks. Why did it have to hurt so much? Arden dropped to his knees beside him, cupping his face. Because they wanted to make you forget you were worth saving. Soren leaned into him, broke, and Arden held him through it. Held him like he was the only tether left in the world. Later, they slipped out under fog-veiled dawn, bodies weak, limbs barely functioning. Echo Hollow behind them was no longer the haven it had been. The wards had fractured. The Dreambinders were split, some pursuing vengeance, others fleeing in fear. Soren walked with Arden's help, his body trembling from withdrawal and broken visions. They reached the edge of the mirror lake just as the sun began to stain the mist. Soren stood at the water's edge, watching the reflection ripple. His face was pale, drawn. Everything keeps slipping, he whispered. Arden stood behind him. I know. I don't know what's mine anymore. You're still here. Soren turned, and Arden stepped forward, sliding his arms around him from behind. Soren stiffened, then melted. They stayed like that, breathing in tandem. Promise me, Soren whispered. What? That if I break again, you won't leave. Arden's voice trembled. I already made that promise, he said. You just weren't awake to hear it. Soren tilted his head back. Their lips brushed, once, soft, desperate. Then Arden pulled away, forehead pressed to Soren's. I need you, he whispered. You already have me. And they stayed like that, until the lake began to shimmer again. And Vesper's voice whispered across the surface. Your soul is not yours, little courier. Not unless you dare face the deepest dream. They looked down. The lake had changed. Reflected in it now was not their image, but a crack. A tear between worlds. A rift spreading toward them like a promise. Chapter 11 The Thorns of Memory. The ruins of Echo Hollow still whispered at night. Long after the villagers had scattered. Long after the fires were doused and the traitors bled into dust. The stones hummed. Not with magic. Not even with memory. But with grief. Soren sat on the edge of a crumbled fountain. Knees drawn to his chest. Arms wrapped tightly around himself. The wind smelled like burnt ash leaf and wet stone. Somewhere deep in the hollows, spiritwood creaked as if still grieving its dead. He hadn't spoken in hours. Arden kept his distance at first, leaning against a moss-wrapped pillar, giving Soren what little space could be found in a place already emptied of everything else. But the stillness stretched too long, and when he finally stepped closer, he heard the whisper. Soren's voice, barely audible, not meant for anyone. Please, just take me home. Arden's breath hitched. Soren. The other boy didn't flinch, but his grip around his knees tightened. His face was pale in the moonlight, eyes glassy. It's just a dream, Soren said flatly. They're always dreams. What is? Soren looked up, and his eyes were haunted. You coming back for me? Arden froze, then knelt beside him. I am back for you. Soren laughed. It was a horrible sound. Dry. Cracked. You don't understand. I've heard that voice before. 100 times. I'll come back. I'll find you. You think when they took us to the Lingram corridor they let us cry? You think we weren't taught to forget? He touched his temple, then his throat. They made sure we couldn't even say our own names. But we remembered anyway. That was the curse. That's always been the curse. Arden's hand twitched toward him. Soren saw it and flinched. No, he whispered. Don't touch me unless you mean it. I do. You say that now. Soren stood, backing away, breath uneven. But people like me, we're only easy to love when we're quiet. Useful. Beautiful in the way broken things are beautiful. That's not what this is. Then what is it? His voice cracked. Why does it feel like I'm still alone when you hold me? Arden stood slowly. Because someone taught you to be afraid of needing anything. I'm not afraid. Yes, you are. Soren's eyes shone wet. I begged for someone to take me home. For years. I used to carve prayers into my skin so they'd leave a mark if I disappeared. You want to know how many times someone came back for me? He held up his hand. 0 fingers raised. Arden stepped forward. I'm not them. Soren shook his head. You will be. No. You will be. You'll get tired. I'll say the wrong thing. I'll ask for too much. I'll get sick again or fall apart and then... Stop. Arden was in front of him now. He reached out. Soren slapped his hand away. Don't pretend this is easy. I'm not pretending. I don't want to hope anymore. You already do. Silence. Then Soren broke. His voice cracked on a single word, barely louder than the wind. Please. Arden caught him. This time Soren didn't fight. He collapsed into him like a storm finally folding, trembling, head pressed into Arden's chest. The first sob was silent. The second choked. After that, they came fast, violent, racking his whole body. Arden didn't let go. He held him through every breath, every tremble, every curse. Then he shifted, bringing his mouth close to Soren's ear, and whispered his name. Not just Soren, but Soren Veynar, with all the memory and ache packed into every syllable, like the name itself was a prayer carved into bone. I'm here, Arden whispered. I'm not leaving. Soren's hands twisted in the fabric of Arden's shirt, clutching like he didn't trust his own weight. You're not real, he gasped. You're just another dream. Arden pressed a kiss to his temple, soft and shivering. Then let me be the one dream that stays. The wind howled around them, but for a while, there was only breath and skin and the sound of two heartbeats thudding too close, too fast. Soren whispered, "Don't stop." Arden only held him tighter. And when Soren finally collapsed into sleep, breath slowing against Arden's collarbone, the tremble in his shoulders ceased, but not the clutch of his fingers, not the imprint he left behind. When dawn broke, its light found them curled together at the base of a moonfern tree, limbs entangled, Soren's body curled around Arden's warmth like something finally at rest. And on Soren's palm, just under the silver featherbrand, a new mark glimmered, a crescent scar, another moon mark, one he hadn't made alone. The stillness shattered at daybreak. Hoofbeats, not dream riders, not illusions, real. Arden sat bolt upright, instincts flaring. Soren stirred, eyes fluttering open, the peace of sleep fading too fast. In the distance, the trees parted. Armored riders emerged from the mist, bearing the standard of the Royal Dream Guard. But it wasn't just soldiers. Between them, cloaked in dark ash robes, a figure walked with a blade of obsidian and bone hanging from her hip. Lady Vesper Wynn, watching, waiting, and beside her, Soren blinked. No, not real, not now. But the figure didn't disappear. Tall, scarred, a familiar curve of the jaw. Thane. Soren's heart stopped. Arden, he gasped, clutching at his shirt. Do you see him? Arden followed his gaze, and froze, because this time, he did. Chapter 12, The Shadow Pact. The moon was bone pale above Shadowgate Pass, casting a crooked, silver outline across every jagged tree and crumbling cliff. The air smelled of burnt moss and spirit ash, thick with the static of things that had died badly. Soren ran, not for the first time, but maybe for the first time with someone behind him who was running toward him, not away. Arden's footfalls were close, too close. Stop! Arden gasped. Yule! Soren didn't stop. He didn't dare. Not with the wind behind them screaming in Therek's voice. Not with the blood still dripping down Arden's neck from the last impact. Not when he could feel Vesper's shadow curling around the path like a second skin. Just a little further, Soren shouted over his shoulder. They reached a split in the rocks, a narrow gorge where light didn't reach. Soren dropped to his knees, hands clawing through moss and dirt. There's a sigil, he muttered. It has to be here. Thane left it. Thane's dead, Arden hissed, chest heaving. But he didn't say it cruelly, just tired, just honest. Soren didn't answer. His fingers bled as he scraped. Then, a hum, low, resonate. Beneath the stones, a faint blue glow ignited, etching itself into a spiral. A wolf's eye crossed with a blade. Thane's mark. Soren pressed both palms to it and whispered a word he hadn't used since he was 5. The ground buckled. A gap opened. Inside, he snapped. Arden didn't question, just pulled Soren in after him as the stone corridor sealed behind. Darkness swallowed them. They fell again. Not down, not physically, but inward. The sigil hadn't led to a tunnel. It had led to a place between. A dream-folded maze of reflection and echo, laced with memories not entirely their own. Every step triggered a new flicker, a voice, a face, a wound. Arden clutched at his chest. His featherbrand was shredding itself with each heartbeat, flaring and fading as if caught in a loop of truth and denial. Soren stumbled against the wall, eyes wide and unfocused. Do you hear it? He whispered. Arden nodded. He heard his father. He heard Mael. He heard the day he chose to walk away instead of saving anyone. And then, you can still leave. Give him up. Save yourself. Therek's voice, but from inside. Not a command. An invitation. Arden gritted his teeth, shoved back the whispers. I won't, he growled. I already chose. The maze pulsed. Ahead, a shimmer broke through the dark, an arch of mirror vine and broken stone. Beyond it, a glade of cracked moonlight. They stepped through, and the dream changed. Soren stood alone in a mirror glade, fog curling around his ankles. The sky here was painted with fractured memories, his brother's voice echoing off invisible walls. You always waited, Sor. You always hoped. Even when no one came. A figure stepped forward. Thane, or something that wore him. Soren didn't cry. He just whispered, I'm tired of waiting. Thane tilted his head. Then why are you still afraid to stay? Before Soren could answer, Arden appeared, half-burned, half-lit, bleeding from his shoulder. The glade folded inward. Dreams collided, and now the three of them stood together. Thane turned to Arden. You'll break him, you know? I already have, Arden said. Soren closed his eyes. Then why are you here? Thane pressed. Because I want to be the one who stays even when I break things. Soren's breath caught. Then the glade exploded in white. They woke inside the real Shadowgate Pass, cloaked in fog, bloodied, panting. Soren was sprawled over Arden's chest, one hand pressed to the brand on Arden's arm. Their bond glowed faintly, dimmed but not extinguished. Outside the cave mouth, the wind howled. Then came footsteps. Steel. Voices. The Rick. You can still end this, his voice echoed. Solmere blood for Solmere absolution. Just give me the boy. Arden pushed up onto one elbow. He looked at Soren. Soren stared back, eyes hollow with exhaustion, but not fear. I'll go, he whispered. If it spares you. No. Arden. Arden leaned down, pressed his forehead to Soren's. You are not my burden. You're the only choice I've ever made freely. Then he stood, drew his blade, walked out into the open. The Rick stood waiting, robes untouched by wind, flanked by two royal enforcers. Don't be foolish, nephew. Arden's laugh was bitter. Too late. He raised his blade. The battle was short, brutal. Arden fought like a wolf bleeding from its last wound. Fast, desperate, reckless. And when one of the enforcers lunged at Soren from behind, Arden threw himself between, taking the blade straight through the side. He didn't scream, but Soren did. The sound cracked the air, and from the rock beneath them, the sigil flared again. A shockwave exploded outward. The soldiers were thrown. The Rick staggered. Soren crawled to Arden, hands shaking, trying to press the blood back inside his body with nothing but trembling fingers and tears. Don't you dare, he whispered. Don't you dare leave me. Arden smiled, bloody. You always say that. Soren sobbed, then remembered. He reached into his coat, pulled free the moonstone fragment, pressed it against Arden's palm. Say my name, he whispered. Say it. Arden's lips moved. Soren. The featherbrand lit up. The blood slowed. He didn't die. Not yet. Later, they sat at the edge of the pass, wrapped in a torn cloak. Soren stitched Arden's side with makeshift thread, biting his lip each time Arden winced. Does it hurt? He asked softly. Arden looked at him. You're touching me, he said. It's the only thing I feel. Soren flushed. They leaned in. Close. Too close. Then snap. A twig cracked behind them. They jerked apart. Soren reached for a blade he didn't have. Arden cursed softly. In the distance, the edge of the pass shimmered. And from the mist, Lady Vesper emerged. Not in flesh. In echo. A shadow smiling. And behind her, a new rift. Fractured. Widening. Chapter 13 Mirrorheart Abyss. The entrance to Mirrorheart Abyss did not open. Yielded. A sliver of nothing sliced across the sky, too precise to be natural, too fluid to be a crack. It shimmered like glass under moonlight, though there was no moon here, only the dark pulse of the mirror realm bleeding into reality. The land bent inward, as if the world was being inhaled by its own reflection. Soren stood at the threshold, his fingers laced tightly with Arden's. Neither spoke. Behind them, the path they'd carved with blood and breath had already begun to close, trees folding like paper, light collapsing inward. Forward was the only direction left. Together, Arden asked. Soren swallowed. Always. They stepped through. The world inverted. They didn't fall. They drifted, like leaves unmoored, like prayers left unsaid. The mirror-hard abyss was silent, but not still. Its silence pulsed with memory. Its air shimmered with unfinished truths. The moment they crossed its threshold, the bond between their palms flared white-hot, then vanished. Soren gasped. His hand was empty. Arden, he whispered. No answer. The fog devoured his voice. The air tightened, curled inward like breath held too long. Then the dream began. The corridor was narrow, lined with cold blue stones and the scent of old soap and iron. A wooden door waited at the far end. Soren knew this place, not because he wanted to, because it had made him. The orphanage. The night the power first flickered inside him. The first time he bled light. The first time someone tried to beat it out of him. Soren. A voice called, low and sing-song. You've been a bad little whisperer, haven't you? He turned. A shadow towered above. A dream shape wearing the face of his first handler. Robes too tight. Smile too wide. You don't want to forget what you are, do you? A switch hissed through the air. Soren backed into the wall. Don't. You called out again last night. Whispered a name. TSK. You're not allowed names. The switch struck. Soren gasped, body curling, arms hugging himself as if that would keep the pain from seeping in. You should thank me, the thing cooed. Without me, you'd still believe you deserve affection. The second blow never came. Instead, the mirror behind him cracked, and from the fracture, a whisper emerged. His name, said the right way. Soren Veynar. Elsewhere in the abyss, Arden fought fire. Not the real kind. The memory of it. The one that lived in his chest, always waiting. He stood in the ruins of their old home, his father's voice already lost in the roar. Smoke burned his throat. Hands reached for him, ghosts of comrades, brothers in training, boys he'd left behind. And in the center of the chaos stood Soren, unmoving. You didn't come, Soren said, voice hollow. I tried. You watched me burn. No. You made a promise, and you broke it. Arden ran, but the floor stretched. The fire danced back. No matter how far he pushed forward, he never got closer. I love you, he shouted. And for a moment, everything paused. The world stilled, and from the flames, a whisper returned. Arden Solmere. His name, his true name, not shouted in anger, spoken like a tether, like someone still believed he was worth being found. They moved through the void like magnets with broken compasses. Soren followed the sound of his name, dragging his body through corridors of memory and ash, through rooms shaped like old wounds, each door forcing him to recall something he'd never wanted to name aloud. He found his younger self curled in the corner of a silent dormitory, fingernails bloody from carving invisible marks into the wall. He knelt and whispered, Arden's real. The child didn't look up. So Soren took a breath and said, I'm still alive, because he stayed. A flicker, a spark. The dream cracked, and through that break he stepped into the in-between. Arden was already there, on his knees, shaking, clutching a blood-washed mirror shard in one hand. Their eyes met. Soren fell into him. They didn't kiss. Not yet. They just held. bodies crushed too close, as if trying to remind themselves they were still real, that their bones hadn't dissolved into someone else's story. Soren wept into Arden's shoulder. Arden buried his face in Soren's neck. "I thought I lost you," Arden rasped. "You did," Soren whispered. "And you still found me." They held each other tighter, and in that embrace, their marks reappeared. Twin feathers burned into their palms, now threaded with silver and blue. The bond was mending, but the abyss wasn't done. The world around them shimmered. The dream shifted again, but this time they were together. They stood in a garden of glass. Mirrors bloomed like petals, and from the tallest one, Lady Vesper Wind stepped forward. Her smile was soft, almost kind. "How precious," she said. "You found each other. You proved the bond." She raised a hand. The mirrors lit with memory. Every betrayal, every tear, every moment of doubt. "Tell me," she said sweetly, "is your love strong enough to survive the truth?" Soren stood. "We don't want your trials. I think you'll find this isn't about what you want." She turned to Arden. "You, in particular, should find this offer compelling." She waved a hand. The mirrors shifted, and now they showed freedom, Arden walking through the gates of the Bastille, his family name restored, his past forgiven. "No more war, no more blood, no more shame," Vesper purred. "Just one thing." She turned to Soren. "Give him to me." Soren went still. Arden's jaw clenched. "You're not taking him." Vesper raised a brow. "Then stay here. Forever. Let the abyss drain you dry. You'll never know if your touch is real, if your words are your own. You'll never be sure he is real." The mirrors shimmered. Soren faltered. "Arden." But Arden turned to him, cupped his face, and whispered, "I know what's real." Their foreheads touched. "I know you are." Soren closed his eyes. "I'm still alive because you're in my story." The abyss flinched. Vesper hissed, and the mirror cracked behind her. Reality surged forward like a wave. They awoke on their knees, still holding each other, at the center of the abyss. The bond burned bright between their palms. They were still trapped, but together, and Vesper was watching, furious. The mirrors had cracked, but not fallen. Not yet. Chapter 14, Trial of the True Name. There was no sky in the mirror heart abyss. Only a dome of memory, bending inward, soaked in silver and shadow. The air held too much weight. Crushed thought, smothered reason. Time spun like thread unraveled. And in the center of the dreamfold, beneath a floating altar of fractured moonlight, Soren and Arden stood with their backs pressed together, breath ragged, palms still bound by the flickering silver thread of their shared mark. Around them, mirrors, hundreds, all watching, each one a version of themselves, shivering, broken, burning, weeping, none victorious. Above them, Lady Vesper Wind descended slowly from the shattered veil, her gown of obsidian silk trailing behind like liquid smoke. Her mouth was curved in something almost fond. Two souls, tethered by accident, or fate. "Does it matter?" she said, her voice echoing as if spoken by every version of her they had ever feared. "You want a way out. I'll offer one." She raised her hand. The altar pulsed. A circle of light formed beneath Soren's feet, sharp, pale, and glowing with the sigils of old tongue contracts. A second one formed beneath Arden. "Each of you stands at the edge," Vesper murmured. "The question is, who will leap first?" Arden stepped forward, snarling. "We already chose. We choose each other." "Do you?" Vesper tilted her head. "Let me make the choice clear." The mirrors surrounding them flickered. Images bloomed in each pane. In one, Arden, alone but whole, walking free through a sunlit field with his family restored behind him. No mark on his palm. No blood on his soul. In another, Soren, fading like mist, mouth open in silent scream, eyes reaching for someone who would never return. Vesper turned to Arden. "Abandon him," she said simply. "Let me take his soul into the dreamfold. I'll make it painless. And you? You will be free." Arden's mouth opened, closed, opened again. He could feel Soren at his side, hear the shift of his breath, the tightening of his fists. "He's bracing," Arden realized. "He expects me to run." Vesper smiled wider. "Or," she said sweetly, turning to Soren, "you can make the noble choice. Give yourself willingly. Spare him the pain. Sacrifice yourself, little whisperer. Let him go." Soren didn't move. His voice came low, hollow. "I've died 1,000 times already," he said. "Once more won't scare me." Arden turned to him sharply. "No." Soren met his eyes, soft, clear, and full of goodbye. "Don't. I've seen you in every mirror since I learned to bleed," Soren whispered. "If I can be the weight that sets you free." "No," Arden said again, stronger this time, stepping into the circle that bound him. "You don't get to make that choice alone. You have a life outside this," Soren choked. "A name that matters." "You are my name," Arden growled. "You're the only part of me that feels like home." Vesper laughed, slow and delighted. "Oh," she purred. "So much affection, so much pain. What a beautiful mess. Very well. Let us begin the true name trial." The altar cracked. Silver lightning erupted from the ground, striking both circles. Soren and Arden screamed, but Vesper wasn't finished. "To pass," she said, "one must renounce their true name. The other must speak it back. Fail, and the bond shatters." Arden collapsed to his knees, blood dripping from his nose. Soren clutched his head, eyes wide, as if something was being torn from behind them. Vesper leaned forward, gaze glowing. "Say goodbye." Soren's voice broke. "I am." Silence. His name was gone. He opened his mouth, and nothing came out. Arden reached for him blindly, fighting the weight pulling him down. "Soren, Soren, listen to me." No answer. The bond dimmed. Soren staggered backward, as if his body were being unstitched from the world. "I don't want to go," he whispered, but his voice didn't carry. He looked at Arden. Tears streamed down his face, and he smiled. "It's okay. If you remember me, I don't need more." Then the floor beneath him began to collapse. "No!" Arden screamed. He forced himself upright, muscles tearing, soul flaring white-hot with a pain he couldn't name. "I remember." He stepped into Soren's fading light. "I remember everything." The mirrors exploded, and from the shatter his voice rang out, full and true. "Soren Veynar." The bond reignited. A storm of light surged upward, wrapping around Soren's body like arms, halting the collapse. And for one heartbeat, everything stilled. Soren looked up, eyes wide. "You said my name," he whispered. Arden stepped forward. "You are my name." Then he caught Soren in his arms. Their foreheads pressed. Tears mingled with sweat, and they kissed, not like before, not cautious, not questioning, but like drowning men grabbing the only air that had ever tasted right. When they broke, Soren whispered, "I'm still alive." Arden's hand curled against his cheek. "Because you're still mine." The mirrors trembled. Vesper snarled, the shadows behind her writhing like smoke in agony. "You think love saves you?" she hissed. "No," Soren said. "We saved each other." The ground beneath Vesper cracked. The abyss moaned. But then, she smiled again. Soft, terrible. "You passed the trial," she said. "But no one said you'd both leave." Before they could move, the altar exploded. Soren's scream was muffled by Arden's body as he threw himself around him, shielding him from the blast. When Arden opened his eyes again, he was alone. He lay on solid ground. Forest. Morning light filtering through broken trees. The mark on his palm burned. But Soren was gone. The bond dimmed. Still there. Barely. Arden sat up, breath caught halfway to breaking. Soren? No answer. Just wind. And far in the distance, the mirror veil trembled. Lady Vesper's laughter echoed through the light. Let's see what a boy like you will sacrifice to bring him back. Chapter 15 The Weight of the Broken Moon. The mirror heart abyss was collapsing. Arden ran. The ground beneath his boots was no longer stone but memory, fractured and pulsing, bleeding with each step. Shards of half-forgotten dreams floated in the air like dust motes, catching light that didn't exist. Every breath felt like swallowing razor wire. Every heartbeat pulled him closer to something ancient, something wrong. But he kept moving. He had no sword, no sigils, only a name, and the promise behind it. Soren Veynar. He whispered it like a ward, like a prayer. Please hear me. Somewhere deeper in the abyss, beneath a bridge carved from lunar bones and echoing childhood, Soren knelt at the edge of nothing. The moonstone bridge stretched endlessly across a void of stilled stars, cracked in 3 places, glowing faintly like it was made of promises that had never been kept. And across every broken span stood a figure from his past. On one side, the warden who'd burned his journals. On another, his first handler, the one who told him boys like him weren't built for softness. And furthest across, Arden. But Arden's face was turned away. He looked at Soren with the coldness of someone who had forgotten. You're not real, Soren whispered, breath fogging. You're not enough, the dream Arden replied. You're not anything worth saving. Soren's hands curled into fists, nails biting into palm. But even the pain felt distant, faded. The wind picked up. It whispered in tongues he hadn't heard since the orphanage. Tasted like rejection. And behind him, the bridge began to crumble. He was going to disappear. Again. This time, maybe for good. Soren. The shout cracked the dream like thunder. Arden stumbled through a tear in the sky, face smeared with ash, silver featherbrand burning, voice raw from screaming. Soren flinched. Not again, he murmured. I can't keep watching you leave. I'm not leaving. Arden dropped to his knees in front of him. You have to hear me. You have to. Soren looked up, eyes blank. Lost. Arden grabbed his hand, pressed it over his own chest. Feel that? That's you. You live here. I don't know how to come back. You never left. The wind howled. The bridge cracked again. Then, another voice. Low. Familiar. Thane. He stepped from the fog like a memory made whole. His expression was softer than Soren remembered. Less soldier. More brother. You keep waiting for someone to say you're worth saving, Thane said. But the truth is, you won't believe it until you say it first. Soren shook his head. I'm tired. I'm tired of being the broken one. Thane crouched beside him. So say it. Say it while you still can. Soren's voice trembled. I wanted someone to choose me. You were never unworthy of that. Soren broke, collapsed forward into Arden's arms, shaking with sobs. I'm scared. I know, Arden whispered, cradling him. I wanted you to love me. I do love you. Soren went still. The world paused. And for the first time in years, maybe ever, he believed it. Light burst from their joined hands. The featherbrand erupted in white-blue flame, wrapping around their bodies like wings. The dream Arden shattered. The handlers vanished. Even Thane faded, his ghost leaving behind only warmth and the faintest smile. You're real, Soren breathed. So are you, Arden said. And I'm not letting you disappear. Together they stood. The moonstone bridge groaned, then steadied. Their bond was no longer silver. It burned gold. They turned toward the abyss's heart and stepped forward. When they woke, it was under a sky they knew. The real one. They lay tangled in a hollow between two stones, arms still around each other, hearts pounding too fast to be calm. Soren stirred first. "Did it work?" he whispered. "I found you," Arden replied hoarsely. "I found me too," Soren said. They lay there for a while, listening to the forest breathe. Then came the sound. Far off, low, haunting, a howl, not like any wolf they'd ever heard. It rolled through the trees, soaked in blood and ruin. Arden sat up. "That came from the capital." Soren nodded, and beside them, on the cracked earth, a single line of scarlet script had burned itself into the ground. "One bond must break for the throne to rise." Chapter 16, Wolves Among Ruins. The world had not healed when they returned. The mirror-heart abyss spat them out like bones stripped of flesh, leaving Soren and Arden half-conscious on the jagged edges of a collapsed watchtower, buried in the ash of things long since burned. The sky above was bruised violet. Not yet night, not quite dawn. Time did not pass normally at the edge of broken realms. Soren stirred first, though his body protested every movement. He rolled onto his side, breath shallow, ribs aching from the last blast of mirror light that had carried them out. His fingers found Arden's hand without looking. Still warm, still there. His heart shuddered. "Arden," he rasped, voice torn raw from too many screams held inside. Arden's eyes opened slowly. They were red-rimmed, unfocused, but alive. "Still not dead," he muttered. Soren gave a weak laugh. Disappointed. Arden's fingers curled tighter. Relieved. They didn't move for a long while. The ruins breathed around them, shattered glass and scorched trees, walls cracked like ribs. Somewhere a bird sang the wrong melody. The world was out of tune. And in Soren's mind, the dream began again. A night, a scream, a door slammed shut in the orphanage's east wing. He was 6, and Thane had found him beneath the sink, shivering. "I thought you were gone," Soren had sobbed, hands curled into his brother's shirt. "I don't leave you," Thane had whispered, lips pressed to his brow. "Never you. Never home." "Home?" Soren had asked. "You," Thane had said, "are the only place I've ever belonged." Soren woke with tears on his cheeks. He sat up too fast. Pain lanced through his ribs. But something was wrong. Too quiet. Arden noticed too. His shoulders tensed. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. Soren nodded. No wind. No birds. Not even the wrong ones. Then boots. A low hum. Metal dragging across stone. And a voice like winter breaking bone. "Well?" Bishop Arden Solmere called from the edge of the ruin. "I suppose the abyss didn't finish the job." They moved fast. Arden grabbed Soren's wrist and pulled them behind the crumbling arch of a shattered corridor, heart slamming in his chest. Soren's legs buckled, but he refused to fall. "I won't slow you down," he gasped. "You're not slowing me. You are me." Soren flinched. That voice, that tenderness, it only made the terror worse. Because now he had something to lose. They didn't make it far. The trap had already been sprung. From the far side of the ruin, figures emerged, hooded, cloaked in dream steel. Sigils burned on their palms. One of them was weeping, eyes wide and trembling, as if they couldn't stop the magic they carried. "Spiral binding," Soren whispered in horror. "They're dream shackled. They can't disobey." Arden drew his blade. The Rick stepped between them, smug, robes immaculate even in the filth. "Well, nephew," he said, tone like poisoned honey. "Still pretending the gutter-born can be more than stains on our boots? Get out of my way." The Rick smiled. Your father begged for the same mercy. Do you remember? Arden's breath caught. You want your little pet saved? The Rick gestured at Soren. Kill him yourself. End this foolishness. Cleanse your name. The Solmere crest can be restored. I'd rather burn, Arden spat. The Rick shrugged. How predictable. Then the sigils flared. The shackled dreambinders screamed. And the storm began. It wasn't just magic. It was soul rot. The kind that turned memory against you, made you bleed emotion until you forgot what was real. Soren collapsed to his knees, clutching his head. His spirit mask began to crack. He could see himself again on the Moonstone Bridge, alone, begging shadows for names they never gave. Arden, he whimpered. Please, don't. But Arden was screaming too, half-mad with fury, blade in hand, cutting down one attacker, then two. Then the Rick struck. A psychic lash too fast, too sharp. It hit Arden in the chest and tore. Not skin. Memory. Soren screamed. Arden dropped. Blood leaked from his mouth. The Rick smiled. Every Solmere ends the same. No. Soren's voice was hoarse. He forced himself upright, staggering toward Arden, his fingers glowing with fractured light. Don't you dare, he whispered. Don't you dare leave me. He dropped to his knees, his arms wrapped around Arden. The mark on his palm flared gold. I'll take it, he sobbed. Give me his pain. Give me everything. Just don't take him. Arden stirred. His hand found Soren's collar. I'm here, he whispered. You idiot. Soren laughed and cried at once, face buried in Arden's shoulder. You always call me that. You always deserve it. Their foreheads pressed together, and for a heartbeat, the nightmare bent. The Rick cursed. Useless sentiment. You'll both rot together. But before he could strike again, a scream tore through the ruin. One of the dreambinders had snapped. Magic exploded outward, wild, uncontrolled. A dream storm. Vesper's voice echoed through the wind. Let it break, she cooed. Let them see that love only chains. The ruin began to collapse. Soren pulled Arden close, shielding him with his body. I'm not letting go, he said. Arden's fingers curled in his shirt. Don't. Even if it hurts. Especially then. Later, how much later, neither of them could say. They sat in the wreckage of a forgotten temple, smoke curling from the stones. The world around them had gone quiet again. Soren's arms were wrapped around Arden, his face pressed to his neck. He whispered, Don't leave me, even if I tell you to. Arden's hand stroked his back, shaking. I won't. I don't need a promise. You already have me. Soren closed his eyes. He didn't say thank you. He didn't have to. But far above, under a sky stained crimson, Lady Vesper watched. Her shadow whispered to the stars. The more you love, she said, the deeper you sink. And somewhere in the distance, wolves began to howl. Not from memory, not from dream, but from war. Chapter 17, Pact of Blood and Shadow. The trees in Mirrorwood Crossing had no roots. They drifted in the fog like thoughts unspoken, twisting, hollow, pale with old memory. The ground itself was spongy, covered in wet ash and crushed glass from shattered soulstones. The air smelled like a warning. Arden's boots pounded against the slick path. Soren clung to his back, barely conscious, arms looped around his shoulders, breath ghosting against the nape of his neck in shallow bursts. I've got you, Arden panted. Just hold on. Soren didn't answer. His weight shifted heavier. His head dropped. Arden stumbled, but didn't stop. Soren. His voice cracked. Stay with me. No response. Behind them, the howls started again. Low. Resonant. Wrong. Not wolves. Not truly. Dream beasts. Vesper's creation. They sounded like grief with fangs. The trees parted. Fog swallowed the trail. Arden darted beneath an arched bough shaped like ribs. His vision swam. His lungs burned. He didn't care. He wouldn't stop. "Soren Veynar," he shouted, his voice flaring with silver resonance. "Wake up. Don't do this. You promised you'd stay with me." A groan. A whisper. "Hurts. I know. But you're not allowed to give up." "I can't." "You can." He skidded to a stop beneath an overhang of mirrored bark, lowering Soren carefully into a hollow in the roots. His hands shook as he touched Soren's cheeks. Too pale, too still. Soren opened his eyes. Barely. Tears clung to his lashes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I ruin everything I touch." Arden flinched. "No. I'm the reason they came for us. The reason your family suffered. The reason the dream burned. I'm cursed. I always have been." He tried to sit up. Failed. "I should have let myself drown in the abyss." Arden gripped his face. Fierce. "Don't say that." "Why not? It's true." "No. You don't understand." "I do." Arden tore the glove from his hand. Then, without breaking eye contact, he raised his blade and cut his palm. Blood welled instantly. Soren gasped. "What are you?" Arden pressed his bleeding hand to Soren's. "Because if you're a curse," he said hoarsely, "then I'll bleed with you." The silver featherbrand flared, trembling. Arden's voice dropped to a whisper. "This is my vow. You fall, I fall. You burn, I burn. You disappear, I follow." Soren's eyes widened. His voice broke. Why would you choose that?" "Because you're the only choice I've ever made that felt like mine." The fog around them twisted, and from it the wolf pack emerged. Their eyes were mirrors, their teeth dreams. One stepped forward, spoke with her voice. "Soren," Lady Vesper whispered through the beast's maw. "He binds you with pretty words, but chains are still chains." Soren trembled. "You don't have to hurt anymore," she cooed. "You don't have to carry his grief, his sins, his love." The wolves began to circle. "Give him to us," Vesper offered. "Give me his blood, and I'll make your pain stop." Soren's body convulsed with sobs. "I don't want him to die because of me." Arden stepped in front of him, blood still dripping from his palm. "Then let me choose to live because of you." Soren reached for him, shaking, desperate. Their hands met again. Their bond ignited. The wolves snarled, then charged. It wasn't a battle. It was a storm. They didn't win. They endured. Together. Arden struck until his arms failed him. Soren screamed until his throat bled light. The bond between them became a rope pulled taut across agony. One fell. The other pulled him up. Again. 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 Until the wolves scattered, howling. The dream cracked, and silence fell. Later, under a twisted oak that still hummed with phantom heat, they lay together on the forest floor, too exhausted to move. Soren's face was buried in Arden's chest. He whispered, "You're a fool." Arden coughed a laugh. "Takes one to love one." Soren looked up, eyes red, voice shaking. "Please don't leave." Arden turned, brushed their foreheads together. "I couldn't," he murmured. "Not even if you told me to." They didn't kiss. They just breathed, tangled together, flesh against flesh, ruin against ruin. Soren's fingers curled around Arden's wrist like he could tether himself to reality with touch alone. "You said I was your choice. You still are. Even broken. Even doomed? Especially then. But the woods weren't done. The trees around them groaned. And far ahead, where the path should have opened toward freedom, the black mist gathered again. A silhouette stepped forward. Soren's breath caught. "Thane?" But the figure didn't answer. It only smiled. And the voice that came next was Vesper's. "Come closer, little brother. I'll take you home." Chapter 18, Temptation of the Lost Brother. The black mist moved like thought, slipping between trees, crawling across moss, threading into breath. It whispered like memory. Soren stood at its edge, bare fingers twitching at his sides, chest rising and falling too quickly. The world behind him, Arden, the ruin, the blood-soaked vows, faded with every breath he took in the new air. It smelled like moon water and the old linen of childhood. And something else, something impossible. Thane, the figure in the mist, lifted its head. Soren took a step forward. The trees around him melted into the shape of the old orphanage's west corridor, slanted light falling through cracked windows. He knew this place. He had buried his first nightmare here. The boy ahead, no, the man, turned and smiled. Sharp features, calloused hands. The worn jacket with the frayed collar Thane had never thrown away, even after Soren told him it stank like smoke and stubbornness. The voice was soft. "I told you I'd find you." Soren's breath hitched. His lips parted, but no sound came. The mist curled tighter, reweaving the dream. Now they were in the east wing. Now they were in the field behind the hollow, where they used to pretend the wind meant someone out there was calling their names. "Come here, little ash wing," Thane said, arms wide. "You're safe." Soren took another step. Somewhere in the waking world, Arden screamed his name. Soren blinked. His pulse stuttered. He whispered. "I tried to be good." "You were perfect," Thane said. "They just didn't see it. They hurt me. I know. They left. I never did." The lie was so gentle he almost thanked it. Almost. The forest floor cracked. A voice tore through the illusion. Rough. Choked. Real. "Soren, don't." He turned. Arden stood behind him, blood running from a gash above his brow. One sleeve torn, chest heaving. He looked like the end of the world and the start of something holy. Soren's lips trembled. "You shouldn't have followed me. Where else would I go?" Soren shook his head. This might be my brother." Arden's gaze locked on the figure in the mist. "Then why does it smell like Vesper?" The Thane thing tilted its head, then smiled too wide, too sharp. "You always ruin the good things," it whispered. Arden drew his blade. "I ruin lies." The world trembled. The illusion shattered halfway, just enough for the forest to flicker between dream and dirt. Soren stood frozen between them, one hand extended to the shadow, the other reaching back for Arden. He didn't know which hurt more. "I missed him," Soren whispered. "I know," Arden said. "And what if you leave too?" Arden stepped forward. "I wanted to," he said. Soren flinched. Arden kept walking. "I wanted to give up, to stop fighting. There were nights I prayed I'd forget your face. Nights I cursed your name because it hurt too much to hold on to." He stopped just inches away. "But I never let go." Soren's eyes filled. "And if I become something unrecognizable? If the curse takes me like it took the others?" Arden dropped his sword, raised both hands, held Soren's face. "Then I'll follow you into whatever monster you become. And I'll still call you home." Soren's breath caught. "I don't want to break you." "You already have," Arden whispered, then kissed him. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't sweet. It was desperate, salted with old grief, bitten by terror, lit with fury that they had to keep proving they deserved each other. Soren clutched at him, shaking. Arden pressed harder, his fingers tangling in Soren's hair. His body folded against his like he was trying to press their bones together. "Don't disappear," Arden breathed against his lips. "I'm still here," Soren choked. "You better be." Their foreheads pressed. Their breaths mingled. Their bond flared, not with power, but pain. A thread pulling tighter across splintered soul. The shadow snarled. The Thane illusion shattered with a sound like bones cracking under too much hope. Vesper's voice flooded the clearing. "You'll regret that loyalty," she purred. "He will drag you into ruin." Soren turned, faced the mist, eyes blazing. "Then let me ruin him with love." The dream cracked, the forest buckled, and the two of them tumbled through the illusion, gasping, clawing their way back into the world. When they finally fell onto the earth again, chest to chest, breathless, scraped raw, the sky had changed. The stars spun wrong. And far ahead, at the edge of a new dawn, a voice screamed. Familiar. Real. "Soren!" They froze. Soren's eyes widened. "Thane?" Chapter 19, The Choice in the Mirror. They reached the edge of the mirrorwood at dawn. It wasn't a clean edge, like the straight border of a map. It was jagged, bleeding mist into the cracks of waking earth. A place where one wrong breath could pull you back into dream. But somehow they found it. And him. Soren fell to his knees before he even registered it was real. Thane. His brother's body was half submerged in the moss and mud beside the lake. Blood had dried in black rivulets from the corner of his mouth. His arm was twisted beneath him. His pulse, a flicker, fragile and defiant. Soren didn't care how broken he was. He crawled forward and threw his arms around him. The sobs came without permission. "Please don't be gone. Please just open your eyes. Say something. Hit me. Laugh. Anything." Arden hovered behind him, silent, his breath catching at the raw sound of it. He had never seen Soren break like this. Not fully. And it cracked something in him. Soren pressed his forehead to Thane's chest. "You were always the one who stayed, even when I didn't deserve it. Even when I gave you nothing. You gave me you," came the rasp. Soren jerked upright. Thane's eyes fluttered open, glassy and gray. He smiled, blood on his teeth. And that was everything. They didn't get long. Not enough for recovery. Barely enough to wrap Thane's wounds and build a fire. Because the lake wasn't just a lake. It watched. And when the surface rippled, unnaturally still despite no wind, they saw her. Lady Vesper Wynn. She stood atop the water as if it were glass. Her reflection smiled before she did. "Ah," she said, voice carrying like silk cut with razors. "The broken family reunion. How quaint." Arden drew closer to Soren, hand resting at his side. Vesper tilted her head. "I'm not here to fight. I'm here to offer a choice." "No," Soren said instantly, voice rough. "You haven't heard it yet. I don't care. You should." The lake rippled. The sky dimmed. And the mirror behind Vesper lit with light that was not light, blood moon crimson, burning through mist and reason. "You see," Vesper said, "the bond has grown too strong, too radiant. If left untouched, it might actually unravel me." She raised a single hand, and the ripples surged. Soren's knees buckled. Suddenly he couldn't breathe. Arden dropped beside him, gripping his shoulders. Thane tried to rise but slumped back with a hiss of pain. Vesper's eyes glinted. "So I offer a kindness," she purred. "You choose." Soren blinked through the pain. "What?" "One lives. One dies. Choose your brother or your lover. The other will be swallowed by the mirror." Soren went still. The world narrowed. Arden froze. Thane closed his eyes. "No," Soren said. "You don't get to ask that. You don't get to make me choose." "Ah," Vesper said, stepping lightly across the lake, still untouched. "But I already have." The lake reflected their faces back at them. Soren saw himself young and scared, Arden bleeding and brave, Thane smiling even in pain. Vesper gestured, and the water flared. A circle of light formed beneath Thane's body. Another beneath Arden. The world stilled. "You have until the next breath," she said. Soren stared between them. "No!" Arden stood. "If you have to choose," he said softly. "Pick him." Soren looked up, horrified. "No." Arden stepped closer, cupping his cheek. "He's your family. He raised you. He deserves peace." "I deserve you both," Soren shouted. "I'm not worth your undoing. You are everything." Thane chuckled weakly. "Would you two shut up?" They turned. Thane was trying to sit up again. He grinned through cracked lips. "For the record, I would also die for you, but let's not make it a trend." Soren's throat worked. "I can't, I won't. You have to pick," Vesper whispered, her voice everywhere. "No!" Soren cried out. "I won't lose either of you." His voice cracked the mirror lake. The ground shook. The blood moon flickered. And in that impossible moment Soren stood. Shaking. Broken. Alive. He screamed at the sky. "I choose no one." The light shattered. Vesper flinched. "What? You don't get to write my ending," Soren said, voice like wind forged in fury. "You don't get to take either of them. You're not strong enough to." "I don't care." Arden stepped beside him, took his hand. Thane, against all reason, stood on his own. "Together?" he asked. "Always," Soren whispered. The mirror cracked, and Soren stepped forward, straight into the lake. The water didn't swallow him. It burned around him, but it didn't take. Vesper screamed as her spell ruptured. The three of them stood inside the collapsing reflection, arms outstretched. Soren between them. The bond flared. Brother. Lover. Home. The lake screamed. The sky broke open. And reality tore. Later, on the far shore, they lay in a circle of scorched earth and shattered glass. Alive. Exhausted. Together. Soren cried again. But this time, they were tears of relief. Thane pulled him into a one-armed hug. "You're more stubborn than I gave you credit for." Arden kissed his temple. "I always knew." Soren laughed, shaking. "I'm so tired." "I know." But none of them moved, because the moment was real, and none of them wanted to risk losing it again. But far above, the blood moon watched, and beneath the earth, something answered its call. Vesper's voice floated on the wind. "This was never about just the heart," she murmured. "It was always about the throne." And deep in the fractured mirror, a crown began to rise. Chapter 20, Before the Flood. The lake didn't explode. It swallowed. Silent. Final. One moment, Soren's fingers were still entwined in Arden's. The next, they were sinking. Not into water, but into something colder. Older. The surface of Mirror Lake shattered, and instead of crashing down, they fell through it as if it were sky. Soren didn't scream. There was no breath, only memory and darkness. The first to hit was Arden. The illusion clamped around him like a jaw. He staggered, eyes wide, breath catching on something invisible. He was standing in the halls of the old Solmere estate, but it was burning. Rooms caved in. Flames licked up the walls like laughter. Through smoke and smoke and smoke, Soren lay crumpled near the hearth, dead, or worse. He reached for him. The Rick stepped from the shadows. "You failed him," the bishop whispered. "Like you failed all of us." "No," Arden gasped. "You ran, just like you always do." Arden fell to his knees, and the fire closed in. Soren, meanwhile, stood alone in a corridor of glass. Every panel held a different version of him. Abandoned at 6, beaten at 9, left behind at 13. And then, the night his father turned away. "You're not strong enough," the man said. The glass didn't show rage. It showed a child who had believed it. Another step, another memory. Thane's voice echoed from behind. This burden is too much. I have to go. More glass shattered. More parts of him collapsed. He screamed, but the sound echoed into silence. Thane stood in fog. He could hear Soren crying, could hear Arden breaking. He turned to run, but the ground wouldn't let him move. It pulsed beneath him like a heartbeat. Take your hands off, it whispered. Let them go. I can't. They'll suffer because of you. I know. You're a weapon, not a brother. But then, his fingers closed around something cold. Smooth, sharp. The moonshadow crystal he'd carved for Soren, the day he was old enough to remember what home was supposed to mean. He stared down at it, and bled. Back in the nightmare inferno, Arden collapsed over the body in the flames. I'm sorry, he sobbed. I wasn't enough. You were always enough, a voice said behind him. Arden turned. Soren stood there, whole, real, not burning, not gone. He reached out. Arden took his hand. The fire flickered, and the illusion shattered. Soren fell to his knees in the glass corridor, hands bleeding from trying to hold too many broken versions of himself. I don't know who I am, he whispered, but another voice cut through the haze. You're mine. Arden's voice. He turned, saw the real Arden standing on the other side of the corridor. No matter what they did to you, Arden said, you're my reason to keep fighting. Soren trembled. Then he stood and ran into his arms. The corridor vanished. The dream cracked. Reality bled in. But the price had already been drawn. Thane appeared before them both, half transparent now, blood soaking through his shirt. He fell forward and Soren caught him. Thane! His brother smiled faintly, eyes fluttering. You really don't quit, do you? Soren's voice broke. You were dying. Why did you follow us? Because you're still my home. Thane pressed the moonshadow crystal into his palm. I kept it. All this time. Soren's hand closed around it, tears streaking his cheeks. You're not allowed to leave again. I have to, Thane whispered. But not because I want to. His eyes flicked toward Arden. You found someone who loves you the way I always prayed someone would. Soren choked on a sob. You deserve to be fought for. The light behind Thane shimmered. Vesper's voice returned, distant but venom slick. I told you no one gets to keep both. Soren stood. Arden stepped beside him. No one asks permission anymore, Arden growled. Together, they pulled Thane to his feet. Together, they faced the lake. And the mirror cracked for good. They landed on the real shore moments later. Burned, bloodied, alive. Soren held the crystal tight against his chest. Arden cupped his jaw, brushing away tears. You came back, Soren whispered. You pulled me, Arden said. You always do. Thane collapsed beside them, weak but breathing. The lake behind them trembled, then exploded into light. Vesper's form shimmered, distant and terrible, silhouetted against the blood-moon sky. And from far off, howls, screams, the gates of the capital, burning, reality and mirror, now indistinguishable. Soren looked to Arden, then to Thane. We have to end this. Arden nodded. Thane smiled weakly. Then let's go rewrite the ending. Chapter 21, Eclipse of All Things. There was no moon, not even the memory of it. Where once light had filtered through the spires of the capital, only a choked red sky now loomed. The ruins of the city crouched in shadow, cracked spires jutting like broken ribs, and every breath tasted like ash and dreams gone wrong. They stood at the edge of the royal promenade, what remained of it. Soren, Arden, Thane. Behind them, Mirror Lake had shattered into oblivion. Ahead, the fallen heart of the kingdom burned in silence. I don't recognize it anymore, Soren said softly. Fingers tightening around the moonshadow crystal. Thane had returned to him. You're not supposed to, Thane replied. eyes scanning the horizon. This isn't the city we were born in. It's what happens when too many lies are left to rot. Arden exhaled slowly. And we're walking straight into it. Soren nodded. There's no other way. They made it only 4 blocks before the first blade was drawn against them. A soldier, no, not a soldier. Puppet. His eyes were glazed with mirror light, limbs trembling with effort as he raised his weapon toward Arden. For treason, the man croaked. Arden Solmere is to be executed by royal decree. Soren stepped forward instantly. Arden held him back. I've got it, he whispered. The man charged. Arden caught the blade with his bare hand. Steel bit into flesh, but not deeply. He twisted it from the puppet's grip, lowered him to the ground, and whispered an apology the man wouldn't remember. Above them, on the roof of the half-collapsed library, Bishop the Rick stood like a statue made of frost. He raised his voice. This is the cost of defiance. Your own blood, cast to the gutter. Soren's rage snapped like a dry bone. You call your family gutter-born because they refused to kneel? Because they chose ruin over duty, the Rick hissed. Because they chose me, Soren said. Theiric's silence was answer enough. Arden stepped beside Soren, still bleeding. Let them come, he said to the air. Let them send the whole city. They did. From behind shattered walls, from cathedrals long broken, from palace towers that no longer remembered sunlight, the last of the dream-bound guard emerged. And worse, people Soren remembered. A baker, an old tutor, the woman who used to sell dream ink under the bridge. All of them, faces blank, controlled by threads of dream stuff pulled taut by one name alone. Vesper. The fog thickened. She appeared between the veils, barefoot, laughing. Her dress trailed behind her like molten glass. I gave this city a way to forget, she said. To forget pain, regret, weakness. And you, she pointed at Soren. You dragged them all back. I gave them truth. You gave them suffering. Her eyes turned to Arden. And you, she whispered, the loyal one, always choosing the wrong side. How poetic it is that you'll die for a family that disowned you. Arden didn't flinch. I'll die for him. Vesper smiled and turned to Thane. And you, Thane Veynar, still carrying shame like a second skin. Ready to die again for the boy you once tried to leave behind. Thane's face twisted, not in rage, but in shame. Soren heard it before he saw it. She's right. He turned. Thane? Thane stepped back, hands clenched. When we were kids, the night they took you to the corridor, I didn't follow. I watched. I let it happen. I wanted... He broke off, voice cracking. I wanted it to be over. Soren didn't move. I told myself it was mercy, Thane said. That you wouldn't remember. That someone stronger would raise you. But it was cowardice. Soren's hands trembled. And then, he moved forward, put his arms around his brother, held him. I remembered anyway, Soren whispered. But I never stopped loving you. Thane gasped, and broke. The 3 of them stood there, entwined, bloodied, bruised, whole only in their ruin. The next blast struck the plaza. Magic slammed into the street. They scattered behind broken stone, shields flaring, light burning silver. Vesper's voice echoed. You think love will save you? That holding each other will undo the cracks in your soul. She stepped onto the moon altar at the city's heart, and became more. Projection. A goddess. A queen of rot and ruin. You are not saviors. You are sacrifices. The army moved again. Soren sagged against Arden, exhausted. I can't do this. You can. They want me dead. They always have. Then let them try. Soren turned to him, eyes wide. What if I disappear? What if I'm too much? Then I'll disappear with you. The words hung in the air like a sword. Soren reached up, touched Arden's face, lips trembling. "You're really not afraid." "I'm terrified." "Then why?" "Because I finally have something worth being afraid for." They ran. Through fire, through fog, through blood, to the base of the old moon temple, where the marble had split and roots grew from bones. Inside, beneath the altar, they collapsed together, panting, barely standing. Thane barred the door. Soren turned, tears on his cheeks. "I don't want to lose anyone else." Thane walked over, pressed his forehead to Soren's. "You won't. I almost lost you. You brought me back." Arden watched, hand on his blade, but his other hand reached out. Soren took it, fingers interlocked. "Let them come," Arden whispered again. "Let the whole world try to break us." "Let them see," Thane added. "We've already survived the worst." Above them, on the crumbling altar, Vesper's projection leaned back like a goddess reborn. Around her, the blood moon rippled, and the army assembled, not of soldiers, but of nightmares. Soren looked to the ceiling, to the sky, to the stars he could no longer see. "Whatever happens," he said softly, "this time, I'm not letting go." Chapter 22. The Temple Bleeds. The last sanctuary was already broken. Once, the Moon Temple had crowned the kingdom in silver, dome alight with divine reflection, marble steps polished by generations of prayer. Now it sagged in ruin, ribs of shattered archways bared to the starless sky, and where prayers once echoed, only the soft drip of blood remained. Soren barely had time to feel the weight of it before the chains slammed into his body. He hit the cracked altar stone hard. The cold of the chain was immediate, alive. Not iron, but woven from binding spells and oaths never meant to be broken. They curled around his wrists, ankles, and throat, and as they tightened, his soul split at the seams. He gasped as the mirror flame hit. The chains weren't meant to hold his body. They were made to reflect it, his guilt, his weakness, his love. From within and without, the mirror began to cut. The Rick stepped from the shadows behind the altar, robes untouched by dust or blood. His voice rang sharp. "The soul must be purified. For the mirror to reflect truth, impurity must be cast aside. Begin the judgment." The runes on the stone floor ignited. Soren screamed. Arden tried to run to him, but the moment he crossed the sigil's edge, a shockwave flung him back against the pillar. He slammed into it with a bone-rattling crack, slumped, but not broken. Through the blur of blood in his mouth, he whispered, "No, no, no, no," and reached inside his coat. His hand closed around the silver feather. It burned against his palm, not calling for power, but sacrifice. He stood, barely. His legs trembled. The world tilted, but his voice found the air. "Take it from me." The Rick turned, bemused. "What?" "Take it from me instead." Arden stepped into the ring of runes again. They flared in protest, magic shrieking at the intrusion. Arden didn't flinch. He lifted the silver feather, slicing his palm. Blood hit the altar floor. "I give my soul," he said, eyes locked on Soren. "For his." The runes flickered. The chains quivered. Soren sobbed, body arching against their grip. "Stop. Don't do this for me. I'll do it 1,000 times," Arden said, teeth bared against pain. "If it means you live." The light pulsed harder. The spell began to rewrite, and then Vesper's voice arrived. Silken, cruel. "Or," she purred, "we could ask the other brother to decide." A gust of mist parted. Thane stood just beyond the edge of the altar, chest heaving, eyes wide with horror. Vesper walked beside him, illusion perfect, as if she had always belonged there. "You never got the choice before, did you, Thane?" she whispered, lips to his ear. You stood by and watched while they took him. You convinced yourself you were powerless. Thane said nothing. Vesper smiled. But what if I told you you could fix it now? That all it takes is a single act of courage. Kill the boy. Take back your life. Your name. Your place. Let him be the curse he was born to be. She held out a blade of mirror steel. Finish what fate demanded. Soren's breath caught. Arden tensed. Thane didn't move. Then, a single tear ran down his cheek. I almost did, he whispered. Back then, I almost let him go. I almost walked away. Vesper's eyes sparkled. Then do it. Thane looked down at the blade. His reflection stared back. Then he looked at Soren, and Arden, and something changed. No. He turned the blade, and drove it into his own side. The spell shattered. Blood hit the altar like lightning. The chains writhed, then snapped. Soren collapsed forward, gasping, as Arden caught him with both arms. Behind them, Thane dropped to one knee, hand pressed to the wound. Vesper screamed. You fool! Thane smiled through blood-stained lips. He's not the curse. He was always the reason I didn't give up. She surged forward, but the altar cracked. A surge of silver-blue light erupted from the blood-slicked floor, throwing Vesper's illusion backward in a burst of dream shatter. The Rick shouted a warding spell, but it fizzled against the storm. Soren clung to Arden. I told you to let me go, he wept. And I told you, Arden said, lips to his hair, that I'd die before I did. Thane collapsed beside them. Soren reached out, took his hand. Don't die, he whispered. I'm not, Thane croaked. I'm finally living. The temple buckled. Pillars crumbled. The sky above wept ash and mirrorlight. Arden helped Soren to his feet, dragging Thane's arm over his shoulders. We have to go. Soren nodded. They ran. Together. Behind them, the temple breathed. Vesper's projection rose from the ruin like a specter crowned in blood. The sky darkened. The moon flickered, and her voice echoed over the ruins. The final eclipse has begun. There will be no dawn. Only one of you will live to see the end. She lifted her hands, and the dreams turned violent. Soren stumbled as they reached the edge of the temple cliff, gasping, his soul torn and aching. Arden pulled him close. Thane leaned against the stone, pale but conscious. Soren looked to them both. I don't care what she says, he said. I'm not losing either of you again. Chapter 23 The Mark of Betrayal. The alley breathed, not with wind, but with heat, tension, shadows, the kind that moved even when nothing else did. Soren staggered against the half-collapsed wall of the tower, breath hitched, a tremor dancing down his spine. Blood oozed slowly from the shallow gash on his side, a wound he didn't remember getting. His fingers brushed it, and when they came away slick, the blood shimmered faintly with silver. No, he thought, not again. Behind him, Arden's voice broke the silence. Soren, are you? He turned too fast, too sharp, eyes wide, unfocused, not all his. They'd been ambushed only moments before. A patrol of what used to be men, now hollowed out by Vesper's dream-born corruption. Their eyes glowed like shattered glass, their limbs moving in jagged rhythm, driven not by will but by command. They'd attacked without warning, without hesitation. Soren had fought hard, too hard. His blades had danced, his soul had burned, but one of them had bled on him, and something entered. Now, in the ash-choked silence, Arden stepped closer. He reached out. Soren, don't. Too late. Soren's hand lashed out, faster than thought, a blade manifesting from reflex and terror. It slashed across Arden's chest, drawing a line of blood so clean it didn't bleed at first. Arden stumbled. Soren froze. The mark glowed red on Arden's skin. His breath stilled. His own blade dropped. "No," he whispered. "I didn't, Arden, I didn't mean." His voice choked. Eyes widened. The curse was still burning beneath his skin. From somewhere deep in the tower ruins, a voice laughed. Vesper. Smooth and distant and everywhere. "Such a delicate bond," she cooed. "All it takes is one crack in trust, and the boy becomes your end." Arden's knees buckled, but he didn't draw his weapon, didn't raise his voice, didn't flinch. He straightened, one hand over the cut, the other reaching toward Soren. "Come back," he said. Soren stumbled back, wild. "You don't understand. I felt it. Something's inside me. It wants to kill you. I can't. I shouldn't. I don't care. You should. I almost. You didn't." Soren's hands trembled. His eyes were glassy, shimmering with that cursed silver glow. "It's still in me. Then I'll stay with you until it's not." The markings spread across Soren's arm. Vesper's voice purred again, darker now. "Push him just a little further, darling. Let him see how close you are to snapping." Soren clutched his head. "Make it stop. Please." He lunged forward, this time not with a blade, with fists. Claws of dream matter flared from his fingertips as the curse pushed through. Arden didn't dodge. The blow caught his shoulder, tore cloth, skin. He grunted, but stayed upright. "Soren," he said again, quieter. "It's me. You're going to die. Because of me." "No," Arden said. "I'm going to die with you if you don't come back." He kept walking toward him, step by step, even as Soren screamed, even as another blow cracked ribs, knocked him to his knees. He crawled, pulled himself up Soren's body, until their foreheads touched, and Soren was trembling, not from rage, but from fear. "I'm turning into a monster," he whispered. "No," Arden said. "You don't know what it feels like, how loud she is in my head, how easy it would be to let go." "I do know." Arden wrapped his arms around him, blood soaking them both. "If you fall, I'll fall with you." Soren sobbed. "Please, don't let me." "I won't." And then, a new voice, clear, broken, familiar. "Soren." Thane stood at the broken arch of the alley's edge, his arm still bandaged, blood dried in his hair. But he was steady. He held something in his hand, a folded scrap of parchment, old, torn, stained with ash. He unfolded it slowly, and began to read. The words were an old poem, one they'd shared as children, the lullaby they'd whispered beneath the blankets on nights too cold for comfort, when the orphanage had locked its doors and the world outside offered nothing but dark. Soren's breath hitched. His eyes flicked toward the voice, and the mark on his skin flickered. "You are not the end of me," Thane read, voice catching. "You are the first thing I ever chose to keep." Soren collapsed into Arden's arms. The curse screamed, then cracked. Light burst from his chest. Pain ripped through him, but it was his again. His body, his soul. The mark faded, leaving only burned skin and scars not quite healed. Later, they crouched together in the hollow of the tower, smoke still curling from Soren's arms. He hadn't said a word since. Arden sat beside him, silent, until Soren finally whispered, "I felt it. I wanted to hurt you. I know. I almost did. You didn't." Soren looked at him. "I'm scared." "I am too." They sat like that for a long time, and high above, on the altar at the heart of the city, Vesper opened her arms wide. Beneath her, hundreds knelt, no longer human. The sky cracked, the moon turned black, and her voice echoed across the world. "The final ritual begins now. Only one soul shall pass through this night untouched." Chapter 24, Bound by Broken Vows. The bridge bled underfoot. It wasn't made of stone, not anymore. The The blood-red arch stretched from the edge of the shattered capital to the base of the moonlit altar, suspended over a void that shimmered with fractured memories and broken oaths. Every step on the bridge echoed like a heartbeat, wet, aching, alive. Soren stood at the start of it, his hand clasped in Arden's, Thane just behind them, breathing heavily. The light of the blood moon made shadows of their scars. Once we start, Soren whispered. We can't stop. Arden met his gaze. We're not stopping. Thane placed a hand on his brother's shoulder. Then let's walk. The first step was easy. The second, heavier. By the 10th, the air had begun to change. Not colder, not hotter, thicker. Then came the whispers. Faint at first, ghosts wearing the voices of those they'd lost. Then came the images. The bridge shimmered. Suddenly, they were back in the orphanage under moonlight, hiding beneath a tattered blanket. Soren at 6, shivering, waiting for Thane. He never came. Soren flinched, faded. Next, Arden in the royal courtyard, staring through the cracked glass of his father's study, watching his mother walk away, hearing the words, "He's not ours anymore." Each memory that rose bled into another. The first time Arden saw Soren, limping through a market, blood on his hands, eyes made of iron and heartbreak. The night Soren nearly died in Arden's arms, whispering, "Don't follow me. Let me go." The first time Thane left the corridor. The night the chains snapped. The night Arden screamed his name into the void and begged the gods to take him instead. The bridge pulsed. Then came the first phantom. It wore Soren's face, but twisted, eyes hollow, mouth smiling. It stepped between Arden and Soren and said, "Would you love him if he tore your throat out? If he forgot your name? If he chose someone else again?" Arden's breath caught, but he didn't falter. He said nothing, just reached past the illusion and took Soren's hand again. More phantoms came, one by one, each shaped from failure, shaped from love. One wore Thane's voice, "You're just a weight I carry. I never wanted you." Another wore Arden's, "You only ever ruin the people who love you." The last wore Soren's own voice, "You were always better off without me." Soren sank to his knees. Tears spilled freely. "Please," he whispered, "make it stop. I already know what I've done. I already feel it every time I breathe." Arden dropped to his knees beside him, took his face in blood-streaked hands. "You're not my burden," he said. "You're the reason I found my way out." Soren broke, but this time not alone. Thane knelt behind them, hands resting on both their backs. "Then walk with me," Soren said, voice shaking. "To the end." The bridge flashed white. A chime filled the air. The phantoms dissolved like salt in rain. Before them, the final stretch of the bridge loomed. Narrow, cracked. Soren turned to Arden. His throat was raw, his eyes red. "If you walk this with me," he said, "then no matter what happens on the other side, no matter what I become, you can't turn back." Arden stared at him. His voice was a whisper. "Even if you let me fall?" Soren's lower lip trembled. "Even if I break you?" Arden gave a soft laugh, wet and fragile. "Then I'll let you break me. As many times as you need. I'll still be there." Soren crumpled forward, into his arms. "I have nothing left to give you," he cried. "You already gave me everything," Arden whispered. "You stayed." The three of them stood together at the edge of the bridge and stepped onto the final path. The vows shimmered behind them, etched in blood and breath, left hanging like threads across the void. At last they reached the base of the moon altar. But the moon was gone, and the sky bled black. The city's heart had been remade, stone carved into bone, towers built of screams, and at its center, atop a throne of twisted mirror and silver ash, Lady Vesper Wynn sat with her legs crossed and her arms open like a queen. "Welcome," she said, voice velvet and venom. "To the end." The entire city knelt around her, some real, some shadow, all bound to her will. Beneath her throne, the final circle had already been drawn, 3 names engraved in blood. One of them glowed, Soren's. Her voice carried across the altar like judgment. "Tonight, the blood moon rises for the last time, and only one of you will leave this altar alive." She gestured to the crowd. "To survive, you must kill. To protect, you must betray. Choose your offering." A beat, a silence. Then her voice dropped to a murmur that shook the bones of the city. "Let the sacrifice begin." Chapter 25. The last game begins. The blood moon hung so low over the ruined city that it seemed to graze the shattered towers of the royal spire. Its glow soaked the world in crimson, stretching over ash, over bone, over the jagged stones of the moon altar now transformed into a nightmare throne. At its heart stood Lady Vesper Wynn, and before her Soren, Arden, and Thane. The 3 stood as one, breath caught in their throats, backs pressed together in the circle carved of obsidian and dream dust. Around them the dream-bound knelt, hollow-eyed, soul-shackled, loyal to a queen who wore beauty like a sword and cruelty like a crown. Vesper's voice rang clear, a lullaby made of knives. "This is the final rule," she said. "You will not die by my hand, nor by the hand of my priest." She turned. Bishop the Rick stood at her side, robes torn, lips tight, fury barely hidden. "You will die by choice." The runes on the altar glowed. "The 3 of you must choose. Only one may pass through the gate. One may live. 2 must be sacrificed." Gasps from the watching throng. Soren swayed on his feet. "No," he whispered. "No, I won't." "If no choice is made," Vesper purred, "all 3 souls are forfeit, claimed by the mirror, cast into oblivion. No legacy, no memory." The Rick stepped forward, face pale. "This was not what we agreed." "Oh," Vesper blinked. "And who gave you the right to demand anything? This was supposed to be a cleansing, a ritual of rebirth." "No," she said. "This was always about power." And then, as easily as a knife slicing fruit, she turned on him. One flick of her hand, and the sigils beneath Theric's feet erupted. His scream split the night. "Run!" Thane roared. They didn't. They couldn't. The circle surged with light, and before they could move, the world fell away beneath them. Soren landed hard. Stone. Dust. Alone. He blinked into darkness. A room of mirrors. Each one showed a version of him alone. Alone as a child curled on the floor. Alone as an assassin blade bloody. Alone in Arden's arms with Arden gone. He stumbled forward, hands clutching his head. "They always leave," a voice whispered. His voice. "You're the problem. You're the curse. You make them leave." "No. They'd be safer without you." "Stop. They already know it." Arden stood in a field of ash. The sky above him bled black. Before him knelt Soren, gasping, begging, covered in blood not his own. And Arden held the knife. "I have to," he said. Soren looked up, smiled. "I know. Just make it fast." "No," Arden choked. "No." His hand moved. He stabbed. And Soren collapsed, whispering, "I forgive you." Arden dropped the blade. The body vanished. Ash swirled. Another version of Soren appeared. And another, all falling, all dying, all forgiven. "You always destroy what you love," said a voice behind him, his own, "because you don't think you deserve to keep it." Thane stood in the ruins of the orphanage. Flames licked the walls. Soren, age 6, screamed his name. Thane stood outside the corridor door, frozen, and did not move. Again and again the memory looped. The child begged. Thane turned his back. Again and again, until he fell to his knees. "I tried," he whispered. "I tried. I was a child too. I didn't know." "You knew," said a voice behind him. "Vesper. You just didn't care enough." He screamed into the floor. In the real world, the moon pulsed, the altar cracked, and Vesper smiled. "Look at them," she said softly to the blood-drenched air. "Breaking already." But then, something flickered. Light. A sound. A name. "Soren." Arden's voice broke through the mirror. The illusions flickered. Soren raised his head. "Arden." The ash trembled. "Thane." Soren screamed, falling to his knees. And from every corner of the shattered altar, the three boys called each other's names, again and again, until their soul marks burned, and met. The illusions shattered. All three reappeared at the center of the altar, bloodied, gasping, alive. Vesper snarled. "No." Soren stood first. "No more of your games. You haven't chosen. We have." He reached for Thane's hand, took Arden's. Their hands locked. 3 souls. 1 vow. Vesper's face twisted. "You disobey the law of the mirror?" "We are the mirror," Thane said. "And the mirror does not kill its own reflection," Arden added. Vesper shrieked. Then the altar exploded. The Rick rose from the shadows, madness in his eyes, blood down his chin. "I will finish this myself." He lifted his hands, gathering a storm of cursed light. But this time, the light met resistance. A wall of silver, spun not from magic, but from bond, from vow. 3 voices rose. "We walk together. We fall together. No one gets left behind." The blood moon screamed. Vesper vanished in flame. Therek's spell backfired, and silence fell. The altar lay in ruin. The crowd dispersed, mindless, freed, empty. The gate remained, still pulsing, still hungry, and Vesper's voice whispered, unseen, "Only one may pass." Chapter 26. The Night of Blood Oaths. The blood moon had reached its zenith. It hung like an open wound above the shattered kingdom, casting a cruel red light over the moon altar and the maze of sacrifice unfurled beneath it. A labyrinth born not of stone, but of memory, dream, and pain. Each path was a mirror. Each mirror was a wound. And within the maze, the 3 chosen bled. Soren ran, barefoot across shifting obsidian, his breath ragged, his limbs coated in sweat and ash. The walls beside him pulsed like the inside of a living thing, each surface flickering with images he could neither trust nor forget. Ahead, a scream, Arden's, ripped from his throat like skin torn from bone. "Soren!" Soren threw himself against the nearest wall. It rippled with cold, hardened, turned to glass. He saw Arden inside, a cell of light and shadow, bound, bleeding, eyes hollow. "No!" Soren roared, slamming both palms into the surface. "Let me through." Arden lifted his head, bruised, barely breathing. "Why didn't you come sooner?" he asked, voice small. "I tried. I'm here. You said you'd always find me." "I will. I am." But the image began to fade, and in its place rose another, a younger Arden, in chains, calling out, and Soren again just out of reach. "You always wait too long," the vision whispered. "You always leave me behind." Soren clawed at the glass. "No, I won't, I swear." The vision flickered. Arden's eyes turned black, and he smiled. Elsewhere in the maze, Arden woke choking on ash. He looked down. His hands were red, his knife slick, and Soren lay dying beneath him, again and again. The same moment, rewound. 100 deaths. 1,000. Every time Arden screamed. Every time he woke up again. And the knife was always in his hand. "It's you," a voice whispered. "You are the curse. No. You kill what you love." He dropped the blade. Fell to his knees. "Please make it stop." A shadow approached. It wore Soren's face. It knelt beside him. "I forgive you," it said. Arden sobbed. "Stop forgiving me. I don't deserve it. But I love you." And then it vanished again. Thane stumbled down a corridor lit only by the flicker of old fire. The orphanage. Again. Always the orphanage. The door down the hall was cracked open, and he could hear his brother crying. He tried to move forward. The floor collapsed. He fell, and landed in a pit of visions. Soren, cold, curled into a corner. Alone. Then Arden, whispering "I'm sorry" as he turned and walked away. Then Soren again, screaming Thane's name as flames licked the walls. And Thane never reaching him. Never fast enough. Soren staggered to his knees, fingers bloodied, throat raw from screaming. He pressed his hand to the ground, felt the pulse of the maze, a heart, dying. He closed his eyes, and whispered not to the gods, to Arden. "Even if I can't reach you," he said, voice shaking, "even if they tear you from me, I will never let go. I will never forget. I will never stop loving you." He pressed 2 fingers to his chest, to the silver mark Arden left there. "Just find me." Arden, lost in the fog of his own guilt, heard a voice, faint, familiar. Soren, saying his name, again and again. "Arden." He rose, blindly, bleeding. "Where are you?" He ran toward the echo. Walls fell. Visions shattered. He burst through flame and fear and memory until, there, kneeling, bleeding, Soren, alive, real. He fell to his knees, threw his arms around him. Soren gasped against his chest. "I thought." "Shut up," Arden said, voice cracking. "I told you, even if you push me away 1,000 times, I will never let go." Soren wept into his neck, and the maze shivered. Far above, in the watchtower of the altar, Vesper stood at the edge of her throne. She frowned. Behind her, the rick stirred uneasily. "Their threads are too tangled," he hissed. "The maze was supposed to break them." Vesper watched the silver light curl up from the ruins below. "They're breaking something," she said softly, "but not each other." Thane dropped to his knees in the center of his nightmare. Before him, the Soren of a dozen pasts lay curled, small and sobbing. He reached out, touched the boy's shoulder, and whispered, "I see you now." The vision raised its head, eyes wide, hopeful. "Don't go." "I'm not," Thane said. "I'll never go again." He pressed his hand to the flame and let it burn. Let it take. Let the pain carve away the doubt. The fire roared and went out. The 3 were cast together into the center of the maze, as blood from their illusions pooled around them. The walls cracked. A flood of light burst forth, dragging them up, back to the altar. They landed in a heap on the broken stone. Gasping. Alive. Changed. The blood moon thundered overhead, and the last bridge glowed. Vesper stood above them, a vision of ruin. She lifted her hands. 3 souls. 1 gate. 1 throne. She smiled, blood-stained lips curved with delight. 3 hearts. 1 must end. Chapter 27, The Sacrifice and the Crown. The blood moon wept fire. Above the fractured world, it pulsed like a wound carved into the sky, shedding crimson across the shattered marble of the moon altar. Every breath of the wind carried the scent of smoke, iron, and something deeper, finality. Soren stood at the edge of the great circle, knees weak beneath him, hands trembling with the memory of every goodbye he'd barely survived. Arden was beside him, not touching, but close enough that their breaths tangled in the air. That had become enough. It had to be. Thane stood ahead of them, framed in the glowing runes of the ancient throne, the split crown, a monolith of obsidian and mirrored bone, pulsing with the memory of 1,000 failed kings. Behind it, Lady Vesper Wynn extended her arms, radiant and awful. At her side, Bishop the Rick raised his arms, voice steeped in corruption. "The time has come," the Rick intoned. "The crown demands balance. One soul may ascend. Two must be claimed." Soren closed his eyes. He felt Arden shift beside him. And then, Thane stepped forward and knelt before the throne, before the woman who had hunted him, before the curse that had shaped all their pain. "I offer myself," he said. His voice didn't waver. "I ask for no crown, no peace, only this: let them live. Let them carry forward what we never could." Soren's breath shattered in his throat. Thane, no. But Vesper only laughed. Cruel, cold, triumphant. "How noble," she purred. "How useless." She turned her eyes to the sky, where the blood moon flared. "This throne does not barter. It devours. All three are one. You do not get to choose." Thane's eyes flicked back to his brother. He smiled. He mouthed, "I tried," then stood and drew his own blade. But he never reached the throne, because Arden moved, faster than light, faster than thought. His scream tore the air apart. "No!" He collided with Soren, grabbing his hand mid-motion, and slammed both of their palms to the altar's mirrored surface. Their blood met the stone. The old symbols ignited, and the world screamed. "Don't," Soren gasped. "Don't if we do this." "I'm not letting you die without me," Arden snarled. "Then we'll both die. I don't care." Soren's fingers gripped his tighter. Their foreheads touched. The altar roared, and they said it together, not in a whisper, but with the weight of every promise they'd never dared to make. "You are my home." The mirror beneath them cracked, shattered. The split crown moaned, splitting down the center. The Rick cried out as the backlash of power struck him, hurling him into the air. Vesper's laughter turned to a shriek. "No, no, and oh." She summoned Dreamflame, cast it like a net. But Thane stepped forward. He bled from the eyes, the nose. His breath was fire and frost. But he raised his hand, pressed his own palm, bloody, broken, against the ruined crown. "You forgot one thing," he said, voice raw. "The vow of a brother is older than the throne." Flash of blood, of silver, of violet flame. The ground split, the moon wailed, and everything stopped. When the light faded, the altar was gone. Vesper was nowhere. The Rick lay broken on the stones, his eyes vacant, his mouth open in silent disbelief. And in the center of it all, 3 bodies, lying still. Soren's hair was stained with silver ash. Arden's chest didn't rise. Thane's hand still rested over theirs. For a breathless moment, the world was silent. Then, a pulse, soft, a thread of light from the shattered mirror beneath them, curled around their fingers, one by one, sank into their skin, and vanished. The crown was gone. The blood moon began to dim, but the promise remained, etched in the altar's bones. Not a prophecy, not a curse, but a choice, one made in blood, in grief, in love. Chapter 28. The crown shatters, the night remembers. The sky was bleeding light. It cracked open at the seams, casting rivers of flame through the shattered bones of the blood moon. Where once hung the throne of all curses, now a maelstrom raged, mirror shards and dream sand swirling in the last space between worlds. The crown, fractured beyond mending, hovered mid-collapse above a chasm that shrieked in no language known to man. This was no longer a place. It was the breaking of everything. And in the eye of it, two souls floated, entwined. Soren's arms curled tight around Arden's back, fingers clutching as if the force of memory could keep them from disintegrating into stardust. "I don't want to wake up alone again," he whispered, voice paper-thin. "You won't." Arden's forehead touched his. Even here, in this place without gravity or rules, his breath tasted of salt and blood and something achingly warm, something like love that had been too long held at bay. Soren's voice cracked. "I used to think needing someone made me weak. But you! I was never strong until I met you." Arden's hands traced the curve of Soren's shoulders, anchoring them both against the shrieking winds that pulled at their skin, their hearts, their truths. "You've always been mine," Arden said, his voice low, breaking. "Even when I was too much of a coward to admit it. Even when I watched you fall and told myself I couldn't catch you." "You caught me anyway," Soren said, closing his eyes. "You always did." Their bodies were ghosting, becoming more memory than matter. Soren could feel his spirit unraveling at the edges, but this time it didn't feel like dying. It felt like giving. He reached for the shard of moonstone at Arden's throat, twin to his own. "I kept this," he said, "all those years, because it was the only thing that ever made me feel wanted." "You were more than wanted," Arden said. "You were mine before I had the words to call you so." Their lips brushed, slow, reverent, and together, in perfect synchrony, they whispered their true names. Names known only to each other. Names that cracked the last tether of the crown. The dreamscape ruptured. Lady Vesper Wind screamed as her stolen throne crumbled beneath her. Mirrors cracked and bled. Illusions shattered into static. She clung to the altar, robes torn, crown slipping. "No!" she shrieked. "No! This is my world, my kingdom." Beside her, Bishop the Rick clawed at his eyes. Blood wept from every seam in his skin as the binding symbols he'd etched onto his soul began to reverse, reflect, devour. "You promised," he cried. "You said I'd rule." "You were never going to rule," she spat. "You were mine. And you?" She turned her eyes to the floating figures of Soren and Arden, now glowing brighter than the crown itself. "You cannot have what I built, what I bled for." But the throne had already rejected her. The world had chosen. At the edge of the crumbling crown, Soren Veynar stumbled forward. Half his body was gone, erased by fire, eaten by dream rot, but his eyes remained. And they were still full of Soren, his baby brother, still trying to save everyone but himself. "Not this time," Thane murmured, and reached deep into the gash across his chest. He pulled free a glimmer of soul light, the last of what remained of him, and cast it forward like a comet. It spiraled toward the entwined figures above, and struck. Soren gasped as warmth flooded through him. He felt Arden shudder in his arms. "Thane," he breathed. He gave it to us." Arden nodded. His hand cradled the side of Soren's face, thumb trembling across his cheek. "Let's finish this." And they did. Together, they took the shards of their past, the blood, the betrayal, the longing, and bound them with their true names, the twin stones at their throats, and Thane's last light. They turned, faced the throne, faced Vesper, and gave everything. There was no explosion, no fanfare, no sound at all. Just release. A wave of silver and crimson and moonlight washed over the altar, over the maze, over the broken bones of kings and queens who had ruled through pain and punishment. Vesper vanished. The rick turned to dust. The crown split down its heart and melted into starlight. And the night, at last, fell silent. When the light returned, 3 figures lay on the ground of what remained of the moon altar. Soren's head was pillowed on Arden's shoulder, their hands still clasped. Thane's body rested across theirs like a shield, arms outstretched, a final embrace. And the blood moon, gone. In its place, a soft new crescent, pale and clean, rising from the edge of the world. The air was warm. The stars were quiet. The night remembered. Chapter 29 After the Storm. The wind moved softer now. Not like before, when it screamed through the ruins and howled like the dying ghosts of a cursed kingdom. Now it whispered, low and tired, curling around the remnants of stone and memory like it too needed to rest. Soren woke first. He wasn't sure how much time had passed, hours, days, maybe weeks. But when his eyes fluttered open, the world no longer felt like it was collapsing. The sky wasn't red. The air wasn't thick with ash and blood. And Arden was breathing beside him, still, alive. His hand was wrapped tightly around Soren's. Soren just looked at him, watched the faint rise and fall of his chest, the subtle flicker of eyelids dreaming something he wouldn't yet share, and allowed the ache in his ribs to feel like peace instead of pain. It wasn't over. Not really. Not ever. But they had survived the ending. The new world was quiet. The mirror-thin barrier between the real and the unreal, the so-called rift edge, still shimmered now and then in the distance, but it no longer pulsed with violence. It breathed instead, like a slow heartbeat echoing through the hills. The old moon altar had collapsed. A jagged half-circle of marble remained, buried in vines, half swallowed by moss and time. And beside it, under the shade of a weeping ash tree, Soren had placed the stone. It wasn't large. It wasn't ornate. Just a small gray slab carved from the altar's fallen bones. He had etched it himself, with bare hands, with no magic, just memory. Soren Veynar, brother, shield, flame. You found us a way home. That night the nightmares came. They always did. Soren woke gasping, shirt soaked through, hand clawing at his chest like the mark of the crown was still burning. He didn't need to call for help. Arden was already there. Wordless, he pulled Soren into his lap, cradling him like something fragile but precious. Soren pressed his face to Arden's throat, breathing in his warmth, his presence, his truth. I dreamed I was alone again, he said, voice fraying. You're not, Arden murmured. You died. I didn't. I woke up, and you weren't there. Arden's hand smoothed down his back. I will always be there. Soren shuddered. You said that once before. I know. You broke it. I did, Arden whispered. And I'll keep saying it again until you believe me. Soren tilted his head back. The moonlight caught his hair, painting silver along his jawline. It wasn't the blood moon anymore, just a thin, quiet crescent. Promise of light. You're not afraid? Soren asked. Always, Arden said. But I'm not running. Not from you. Soren's hand found his, fingers laced. They kissed then, slow, desperate in its gentleness. Not like survival, not like apology, but like something honest. It tasted like ash and tears and the kind of love that didn't need to be explained anymore. When they broke apart, Soren didn't pull away. I don't want a throne, he said, voice steady. Good, Arden replied. There isn't one left. Soren's smile was small, sad. Then what do we have? Arden looked down at their hands. The scars, the blood, the remnants of everything. And he answered, us. The new village rose slow and careful, built by the hands of those who had once only known fleeing, hiding, dying. Now they planted things, rebuilt, laughed even. The exiled seers crafted wind charms from old dream glass. Children played with broken mirror shards that no longer reflected nightmares. The river flowed past where the old bloodstone fields used to burn. And Soren and Arden, though scarred and tired, stayed. They helped shape the borderstone paths, drew lines on old maps that now meant home, ate with the others, sat with the silent, and every night they walked, hand in hand, beyond the outer edge of the village, to the ridge overlooking the valley, where the last piece of the moon altar stood, and the stone for Thane rested quietly. One evening, as the new moon bled silver over the hills, they stood at that ridge. Soren's fingers brushed the stone. "I used to wonder if we were cursed," he said. "We were," Arden said. Soren gave him a look. Arden smirked. "And then we weren't." Soren turned back toward the horizon. The mirror line shimmered, just once. A flicker, a ripple, and in it, a silhouette, broad-shouldered, long hair lifted by wind that didn't exist. Thane, smiling, gone before either of them could blink. Soren leaned his head on Arden's shoulder. "I hope he's somewhere peaceful." "He is," Arden said, voice certain. "Do you really believe that?" "I believe in you. That's enough." They stood in silence. The stars burned brighter than before. Somewhere behind them, a new child cried its first breath, and the wind, no longer afraid, carried the sound into the night like a lullaby. Chapter 30. The New Moon's Promise. The lanterns floated like quiet stars on the water. Dozens of them, paper-thin and trembling, lit by soft candlelight and cradled by the surface of Mirror Lake. They bobbed gently against the ripples, casting golden trails across the black mirror of the water, while the villagers stood in silence at the edge of the clearing, watching, remembering. No one spoke. They didn't need to. The festival wasn't for celebration. It was for what had been lost, and for what might just barely be beginning. Soren stood apart from the others, barefoot on the damp grass, cloak drawn around him more for memory than warmth. He clutched the moonstone in his hand, the one Thane had saved, the one that had once marked him for ruin, and somehow led him here, to peace, or the closest thing to it. The stars shimmered. The moon had not yet risen. It was the night of the new moon, silent, shadowed, pure. He knelt by the water's edge, held the stone to his chest, and then, without a word, leaned forward and let it fall from his fingers. It hit the water with no splash, just a ripple, as though the lake itself understood. Arden didn't interrupt. He stood a distance away, arms crossed, leaning against the old cedar tree where they'd first kissed after the war had ended. Soren sat back, eyes watching the place the stone had vanished. His profile was calm, sad, but not broken. When Arden finally approached, his footsteps were soft. The grass barely stirred. He sat beside Soren, close but not touching. Soren's eyes flicked toward him, then back to the water. "He would have hated the quiet," he said. Arden smiled faintly. "He would have filled it with bad poetry and worse wine." Soren exhaled a shaky breath. "He would have made fun of me for crying. You always cried quietly." Soren turned to him. "And you always knew." Their eyes held. The moment stretched, softened. "I didn't get to say goodbye," Soren murmured. "You did," Arden replied. "You just didn't know it was goodbye yet." Silence again. Only the sound of water, the soft creak of lanterns drifting toward the horizon. Soren leaned into Arden's shoulder. "I think," he said slowly, "I'm finally starting to believe the world doesn't have to hurt forever." Arden's arm came around his back, pulling him closer. "It doesn't," he said. "Not if we stay here, together." Soren tilted his head up, eyes meeting Arden's. "Do you promise?" "I don't need to promise," Arden said softly. "I just need to stay." They kissed, slow and quiet, like the night itself had been holding its breath for them. It wasn't the kiss of two warriors who had faced down gods or rewritten fate. It wasn't hungry or desperate or sharp. It was true, simple, complete. Soren's hands curled into Arden's shirt, fingers resting over his heart. Arden's thumb brushed gently along the line of Soren's jaw. When they pulled apart, their foreheads rested together. And neither of them said anything for a while. They didn't have to. The last lantern drifted toward the middle of the lake. Somewhere in the distance, a baby cried, and a mother hushed them with lullaby humming. Old men stirred the coals. Young lovers whispered in the shadows. Survivors, all of them, building something out of the ashes. Soren looked out over the water. The moon rose, thin, new, unburdened. Its silver edge caught the tips of the floating lights, casting a single narrow bridge of reflection across the lake. And in that light, Soren could almost see a figure at the edge of the woods. Broad-shouldered, familiar, Thane, smiling. He didn't say anything. Didn't need to. He turned, fading into the trees. And Soren, with tears in his eyes but no pain in his chest, smiled back. Later that night, Soren and Arden lay beneath the open sky on the flat stones behind their cottage. Soren's head rested on Arden's chest. Their hands lay twined between them. "I used to think we were part of someone else's story," Soren murmured. "Like we were just pieces of some curse playing itself out." Arden's fingers traced circles against his shoulder. "We were," he said, "but we broke it." Soren closed his eyes. "And now, Arden whispered, "we get to write the rest of it ourselves." Soren tilted his head, brushing a kiss along Arden's throat, then whispered, "Then let's make it a quiet story. No thrones, no gods, just new days." Arden smiled into his hair. "And nights." They lay in silence again, and this time it felt right. Somewhere beyond the lake, the wind stirred the edge of the trees. The mirrored surface shimmered once, twice, and was still. The new moon held its place in the sky. Not full, not perfect, but present, soft, bright enough for two shadows to hold hands at the water's edge and walk forward into what came next. Some names are only remembered after the night ends, and their story only begins when the new moon rises.